Welcome everybody to our Provo Municipal Council meeting. It is a work session. Today is Tuesday, September 15th, 2020. The time is 12:01 p.m. This meeting will be conducted entirely via electronic means. On September 8th, 2020, in accordance with Utah Code 52-4-2074, the council chair, George that conducting meetings of the municipal council with an anchor location such as the municipal council chamber presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present there. These are the facts upon which I made this determination. Utah has been in a declared state of emergency due to COVID-19 since March 6, 2020, a disease outbreak which the World Health Organization has characterized as a pandemic. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention state that COVID-19 is easily spread from person to person between people who are in close contact with one another. Spread is through respiratory droplets when an infected person coughs, sneezes, or talks, and it may be spread by people who are non-symptomatic. Federal, state, and local authorities have recommended that individuals limit public gatherings, wear face masks, and follow social distancing guidelines. The Provo City Council has adopted a local mask requirement in indoor areas accessible to the public, including without limitation businesses and city buildings where social distancing is not possible, reasonable, or prudent. As reported by the Utah Department of Health, reported COVID-19 cases as measured by the number of cases per 100,000 people in Provo continue to rise at a significantly higher rate than reported rates for the county and the state. Physical distancing measures will be difficult to set up and maintain in the Provo Municipal Council chamber. Additionally, the chair of the governing board of the Redevelopment Agency of Provo City has determined that its meetings are subject to the same risks and has adopted the same procedures as the Municipal Council. The meeting will be available to the public for live broadcast and on-demand viewing at youtube.com/Provo City Council. This meeting is being broadcast live on the web and on the Provo City Council YouTube channel, where it will also be available for on-demand viewing. I remind participants to mute your microphone when not speaking so as to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. I'll begin with a roll call, and I'll state the names of those who are present. I'm George Hanley, Council Chair. I'm joined by Vice Chair Dave Harding, Councilors Dave Shipley, Shannon Ellsworth, Dave Sewell, and Travis Hoban. And we will be joined later today by Council Member Bill Fillmore. We're also joined by our Chief Administrative Officer Wayne Parker, Deputy Mayor Isaac Paxman. We will be joined by the Mayor shortly, and also joined by Brian Jones, our council attorney, and Cliff Strachan, our executive director, and staff who are assisting us on this meeting. We'll begin with an opening prayer by David Harding.
Father in heaven, we come before thee at the beginning of our meeting to plead for thy assistance in our deliberations and our discussions. We ask thee to bless us with wisdom that we may act in the best interests of the city and its residents. We ask thee to help us to be able to understand what's most important and to be able to find the solutions that will be best for the people of Provo. We ask for a blessing upon all the presenters today, that they may present clearly and may help us to understand the heart of the issues that we will be discussing. We ask thee to bless all of the employees of the city as they strive to provide services to the people of Provo, that they will be kept safe and that they will be able to provide those services well. We ask for blessing upon all those in our community who are ill and for those who are caring for them. And this we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Although this is a public meeting, only the presenters and those invited by the chair may speak or ask questions unless otherwise invited by the chair. Please use the raise hand function to indicate that you would like to speak, and please wait to speak until called on. Note about the agenda. Please note that the order of the items on the agenda has been changed to better accommodate the various presenters and attendees. The number for each item has been kept the same, but will be heard in a different order. The start times for all of the items except 1, 5, and 6 will remain the same. Presenters, unless we contacted you before the meeting, this reordering will not affect your start times. So we will be starting with item number 5 and then item number 6. And then we will proceed to item numbers 2, 3, 4. We'll take a break, and then we will have item number 1 and then conclude with items 7, 8, and 9. So we will begin then with item number 5 on the agenda, which is a presentation regarding incentives. This will be presented by Keith Morey, Economic Development Division Director, and David Walter, Redevelopment Division Director, and Bill Pepperoni, Development Services Director. I'll turn the time over to them.
Thank you. Hannah, do you have the presentation up, or?
Yes, David, who do you want me to share control with? You?
Please.
Your account? Okay, I'll have that up in just a moment. Just when you see the prompt at the top of the screen, click to accept. You can click through at your pace.
Thank you. So what we thought we would do today is kind of go through a little bit of what economic development does, some of the incentives we used, and also show some examples of these incentives that we've done in the past. Okay.
Control the screen. You are now.
Okay, so as you can see, economic development covers a pretty broad array of activities. There's probably no one single description that we can give for economic development that's going to cover all of these different activities that we do during the course of our endeavors for the city of Provo. But what we can say is that this is the ultimate goal of economic development, that it's to improve the well-being of our community through these ideas. So along with that, there's probably not one definitive policy that the council could adopt that would be help achieve economic development. There'd be a broad variety of policies that could be enacted. These are incentives. This is typically what we do to try to persuade companies to build new facilities or purchase equipment, enter a new market. And for the last, this is from the International Economic Development Council, that US states and municipalities spend $70 billion annually on incentives to help induce companies to do something, either stay or relocate or create new jobs. So why would we have a local incentive policy? We want to negotiate from a position of strength. We would like to be able to avoid political problems and to align our priorities in terms of the local level with the types of jobs that we're recruiting. We may not, necessarily want to recruit, for example, some food processing jobs because they'd be too resource intensive. And finally, we are doing this to be able to compete on a national and an international level. And if we don't have an incentive policy or if we don't offer incentives, that we are in some cases frozen out of different opportunities. These are the various tools that we have to do some recruitment opportunities. You can see the community reinvestment area. That is the new name for redevelopment project areas. We have just recently undertaken a public infrastructure district on behalf of the medical school down by the golf course. Special assessment areas. Opportunity zones are federally designated incentives. Those are, they were enacted by President Trump. The last two are handled by the state of Utah. They are awarded through the state to the Governor's Office of Economic Development. Typically, when a business or a corporation receives one of these incentives from the state kind of looks to the local municipality to put something else on the table as well. These are different types of incentives that we have done in the past. Most of them take the form of infrastructure improvements. For example, when we did the mall, the money that was generated through the redevelopment project area was to reimburse the developer for upsizing the utilities that were at the mall. We have done business development loans and grants. We've done some fee waivers and reimbursements. We also do quite a lot of land purchase and site assembly. So later on, we'll see a couple of examples where the agency in particular has participated in property acquisition and assembly. We've also received a loan from the EPA for environmental cleanup in various areas in the community. Tax increment financing and sales tax really are the only tools that we as a local Utah community have to offer to put on the table. There's a lot of things that we can't control. These are some of the opportunities that we have with the funding that we receive to be able to provide funding to different businesses or developers to do something. And so we are trying to use this as best possible to keep high-paying jobs or attract high-paying jobs and to revitalize areas that may need a little bit more attention. The most important reason that we choose that these are all post-performance type incentives. And the reason we use that language is that this does not require money from our pockets up front for the development. So they come in, they have to build the store, they have to build the business or hire the jobs. Right, they have to reach certain employment thresholds to be able to qualify for this money, which we get subsequent to the development. So in the case of tax increment, it's money that shows up after the project's developed and they pay their normal taxes. In the case of sales tax sharing agreements, they have to have the sales to be able for us to reach that threshold where we would share that. These are 4 examples of sales tax sharing agreements that we've done. Done one for Parkway Village, where the Walmart neighborhood market is. We worked with Ross, Dress for Less, East Bay Shopping Center. We've also done one for Days Market. And we have approved one for Riverwoods, but we have not finalized that yet due to some issues that Riverwoods is putting together the numbers and quantifying all that information. Oh, sorry. This is an interesting, it's from 2016, and it shows the per capita incentives that are offered by states. And you can see that Utah over here is, in the immediate area, is the lowest, second only to Nevada. Nevada has a pretty large war chest that they get their funding from other sources. And so on a per capita, they don't offer as many incentives as some of the others, but you can see Texas here is very large, Florida is large, Michigan's large. Right, Texas, Florida, Michigan, New York. But on a per capita basis, Utah is the second lowest in the area.
But I think actually that's really important for us to recognize for a couple of reasons. I mean, I think sometimes, especially as citizens, when they hear about an incentive opportunity that's being presented because of a development, the thought is that the cities are just handing out money. And that's really not the case in Utah. One of the reasons why we have the best state-run budget in the country, and we're considered to be one of the most fiscally sound states in the country, is because of the incentive approach that the state and the cities within the state kind of pursue. So we're very low on the amount of incentives that we offer, compared to other organizations, other states and other places around the country. But what that also means to me is that we be cognizant that because we don't contribute as significantly as some other locations do, that we do utilize the limited tools that we have when it's appropriate. Usually incentive opportunities aren't put together unless there's some kind of a development problem that won't allow the development to go forward. And once that gap is found, the incentives are usually utilized to bridge that gap to allow development that wouldn't go forward but for that incentive opportunity. So to me, that's really telling. It's reassuring to us that, yeah, we do participate, but we participate in a very fiscally responsible way and on a limited way and only where it's absolutely needed.
So here are some of the projects that we've done over the years that the city of Provo has done. You can see they go from retail, they do industrial, office, and then obviously downtown revitalization. We'll start with that. Downtown is something that we spend, a lot of time and focus on. We think we've seen some extraordinary results from it, and it's been successful. This is the Wells Fargo building. So the redevelopment agency put in $4 million for this particular project and helped assemble some property. And for a time, we rented office space in this facility. And so we still control the rights to some of the parking and the associated parking deck. But this gave us an opportunity to have some Class A office in the downtown, as well as some of the first residential in the downtown area as well. This is the financial center project area, or the Zions Bank building, I guess I should say. So in 2006, this is what we took the property and created a project area that helped put the Zions Bank building in there, as well as some associated parking, pay some tax increment. And what the result is you can see that over the years, we've seen an increase in the value and in the increment, not only to the agency, but also to the taxing entities. So they've seen their shares go up as well. And as a result, we've had over 20 million in new capital investment, approximately 200 new jobs rather, sorry. And we've added Class A office space to our downtown area. This is the Liberty Center Apartments. The agency was involved in acquiring the property. We also put in $420,000 of federal funds that we received to increase the parking. There's an integrated parking garage in here. We have 3 units of ground level commercial. Interestingly enough, the developer, Cowboy Partners, did not provide any parking for either the employees or the customers of the ground level retail, but they've all been very successful, and so far they've managed to succeed during the COVID crisis. This is the City View Apartments. This was done by PEG Development. So they came to us and they are looking to put in units. They asked for a exemption from the ground level retail requirement that's in the zone, but they did build the ground level to a commercial standard so that in the future, when conditions are a little better, they can convert those ground level units into commercial units. This is 63 East. This was another project that we were involved in terms of acquiring property and transferring property over to the development to make it happen. As a result, we had the 42 units plus some meeting space, plus some ground level retail that we've added now more residential to the downtown area, and had a nice infill project here between the two buildings. And if I'm going too fast, or if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me. The convention center, the agency was, and the city were very involved in this both in terms of acquiring property, relocating some of the tenants, transferring the property over to the county to make the convention center happen. We also have a parking obligation for the convention center that we're working on to make that a reality. But this was, something that we felt belonged in the downtown, and we were very active in making that happen. Okay, these are our downtown facade improvement grants. And you'll see a couple of buildings and a couple of examples, but this has been a very successful program, we feel, for us. It's helped in increase the appeal and the attraction of the downtown storefronts. And I think it's important to note here that this is not money that we are having to come up with to make happen. This is money that we are using as part of our federal funds from the Community Development Block Grant. And so I'll show you a couple of examples here. Here's the Kolache Place. Modern Shoe took advantage of it, and a couple of others. So if you look along the block, Provo Town Square, that's all been rehabbed. There are a couple of other stores. The facility where Fat Daddy's Pizza currently is was rehabbed. So it's been something that's been very successful. We've expanded the area, and I know that our Community and Neighborhood Services Department is looking to expand that down University Avenue and in other places so that we can have more of an impact. Sometimes we just do blight removal. So sometimes the agency and or the city will buy property and hold on to it till the right opportunity comes along. And we refer to that as land banking. This was the former site. This is the site of the former Hotel Roberts. So it was something that had a blighting influence on the community. We opted to buy it, demolish it. We held it on for, and now it is a part of the Temple Redevelopment Project. So again, it's something that we just held on to and waited for the right opportunity to come along. We don't indulge in a lot of land banking, but in several places around the community, we have purchased property as, the council has given that direction. For industrial, this is the Mountain Vista Community Redevelopment Project area, or community reinvestment area now. So it's quite a large tract of property, 180 acres. It was the former U.S. Steel site. So it was a very heavy, intensive use, industrial use, and it was fairly contaminated. So this was an opportunity for us to come in with the federal government through the EPA, with the state of Utah through the Department of Environmental Quality and the city of Provo, work to clean up the property and get it to an industrial standard, do a lot of remediation, a lot of reports. Mr. Holmes has quite a few binders in his office that refer to this, that he's worked on over the years. And it wasn't just, the environmental contamination. We also had blight on the property, as well as wetlands that we had to go through the Army Corps of Engineers to help get that cleaned up. And so here's the project area again. It's fairly large, 180 acres, but it's been something that we've been working at and that we've been adding value to it over the years. At one point, the city owned it, so we had a very low base, there was a very low base year valuation. And as a result of our partnership, not only with the redevelopment agency and the federal and the government, but also the county and the school district, we've been able to put in over $30 million in new capital investment and add over 400 new jobs, as well as add 180 acres of property back to the tax rolls. So instead of being off the tax rolls and being non-productive, that property is now back on the tax rolls and generating income, as well as generating jobs and employment opportunities for the residents of Provo in particular and Utah County in general. Duncan Aviation. So this was out by the airport. This was in 2007. There was a fairly active recruitment effort. Duncan Aviation came actually, I think, I may have parts of this story wrong. I wasn't involved in it, but I understand that Duncan really came to the city of Provo. They were looking for a Western location for their maintenance and rehab hub. And they had been talking with Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Ogden, Utah. And they came to Provo. They spent quite a lot of time here. They sent quite a lot of people here. And ultimately, they picked Provo, not because we put the most money on the table in terms of trying to recruit them, but because Duncan felt that Provo was the best fit for them in terms of corporation. So they're going to be doing $80 million worth of investment at the airport and hire 500 to 600 jobs once all the phases are built. And it was a result of the quality of life and the community and the opportunities that are here in Provo and in Utah County that pushed Duncan to locate their facilities here at the airport. So you can see the construction that's going on. It was the agency bought the property, we leased that property to Duncan, and we built the apron that surrounds them. It's going to help get their planes from these hangars and repair bays back out to the airport. We also support entrepreneurship. We have a great tech community here in the Valley. We have a lot of highly motivated and innovative individuals here who are working that. While we don't have a standard entrepreneurial support organization the way some communities do, we've been very active in supporting the local community through helping to get 1 million cups located here, working with the startup building, creating co-working space, working with the Blight building and helping them to create a space where YouTube and other digital creators can come in and have a place to create their material and post it. I think at one point, the community was told by Google that we were the number 3 location for posting videos to YouTube. So there was a lot of interest. And that was one of the reasons Google took a hard look at this area. Here's the Parkway Village. This is one of the opportunities that we had to do a retail sales tax sharing agreement. So when the bus rapid transit system came through, they wanted to do a more fully signalized intersection here, which would connect the 2 shopping centers. This is the former Shopco, Plumtree Plaza, and then this is the Parkway Village. The problem is that although they had one here, by putting it here, there was a occupied building here. The owners had a paying tenant that was in this facility that would have this. For that to happen, this property would have to be demolished and refurbished. The tenants relocated. So we worked with them to create a retail sales tax sharing obligation that would help them recoup some of the costs involved with demolishing the building, building some new space, and relocating the tenant. So this is where Nico's Pizza was. They're currently now on Cougar Blvd off of Freedom Boulevard in Cougar. So they were successfully kept in the community. And here you can see today they went ahead, put the intersection in, added some additional space, and were able to create some opportunities. So they've been, happy that they've been able to keep a tenant in Provo as well as add some additional space here to the shopping center. Cultural development, we also have helped fund rooftop concerts. So when it was initially done, they did it on one of the parking structures that the agency owns, but now we're doing it at a ground level, but we help fund that project and get it off the ground. We look for other opportunities when we can. Blight removal. Here is the IFA, former IFA development. So you may remember that this was a facility that had been in Provo for a long time. IFA had outgrown it, needed to expand. They really couldn't expand on site. They were looking around trying to figure out what they were going to do. They had an opportunity to buy another building that had been vacant for a while. This was the former Office Max building. And the council went ahead and authorized us to acquire this property, not only to assist IFA, but to understand that we had a chance to redevelop this entire block. If you may remember that this block only has 3 property owners. And when we acquired a quarter of the block now, we were one of those property owners. And we subsequently were able to work with the developer, and now we are looking forward to the mill race development, which is still happening. They ran into a little bit of funding issues. Their funder has asked them to kind of break it off into smaller phases, which they have done, and they came back and presented that to us. And so we are looking for them to start groundbreaking on this project here shortly. These are the redevelopment project areas that are currently in the community. You can see we've added a couple. This was the golf course, and this was the one for River Woods. We have a couple that are coming off. That's primarily the Mountain Vista and the financial services of the Zions Bank building. Those will come off in 2021. The mall will come off in 2025. And then the others can start to come off after that. So wanted to give a quick example on tax increment. This is kind of how the redevelopment agency gets the bulk of its funding. So you can see we take a piece of property, the tax rate, and I have to reiterate, the agency is not a tax levying institution. We don't have that authority. We've never had that power. What we do is sort of change how the taxes get parceled out after the fact. So in a normal situation, you'd have a piece of property, and I kept the numbers at a round basis because it was easier for me to figure out in my head. But so the value is $10,000. The tax rate's 1%. So the taxes on this would be $100. These are the three biggest tax entities in the property tax bill. And so based on the current rates, this is how that breaks out. Those of you that are quicker than me will notice that this doesn't quite add up to 100. There are some smaller tax entities that are in there, but I didn't include them in this example. So now that we have redevelopment, it comes in, we get cleaned up, the value of the property now goes up to $100,000. And tax rate stays the same. The new taxes are $1,000, and participation for this example is at 50%. So the tax entities have agreed to give up 50% of their increase in the taxes for this project. And so this is what they get now off that 50%. I think if you were to go back and look at the taxes under the old situation, you would see that this is roughly a 400% increase on a percentage basis from what they were getting to what they're getting now as a result of the increase in the value. And that's a pretty quick overview of some of the projects as well as some of the incentives that we've done. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walter. We just have a few minutes for this item still remaining. So if there are any questions from the council. All right, well, seeing none, go ahead, Mr. Harding.
Thank you. I'm debating on saying anything. I guess one question I have, can we go back to that state level funding graph that you had there? I did have one question on that.
Bubble chart? Yeah,
the one with that showed across the country. Yeah, yes. That one. Perfect, thank you. Do we know if those are state level incentives that are used to attract companies to the state, or are those like local community level incentives?
It's a combination of all of the incentives that are available at the state and local level, and okay. I think this came from the New York Times. It's actually a presentation that the Economic Development Corporation of Utah put together with Craig Smith and his group, and they had kind of done some research and found this information was put together from the New York Times, just trying to identify when people talk about incentives, what does that really mean, and how do cities relate to each other in how they participate.
Okay, thank you. Just looking at that, it looks like we're on par with New Mexico, greater than both Nevada and Wyoming. If we're talking about adjacent states. But I guess the biggest thing I have is for Texas obviously is a really big circle there, and if we're mixing both state as well as community. I think there's times where we have kind of the Duncan Aviation type projects where we do bring in kind of a national company, and I imagine we had some participation with the state as well on that. I'm a little more concerned where we're talking about, it might be a national chain, but a national chain decides, hey, we're going to open a store in Utah County, and now we're going to select the best site for us. And much of that at times appears to be just how much are the local companies willing to give up in order to get us. And so we don't care if we're in Orem, we don't care if we're in Provo, we don't really care where we are at in Utah County to a degree. I mean, obviously freeway access and other things play into that as well, but at times these tax incentives start pitting cities against each other, and whoever's willing to give up the most of their local taxes end up getting this. And I guess that's where my concern is, because at least from a county level, we're going to be getting a store anyway, and it's kind of a perverse competition, pitting ourselves against other company or other communities in our area. And so I look at Texas, and if that's mostly intercity competition, Texans as a whole aren't any better off for all of that money that's being used, in this way. I appreciate it, and I guess I should say, since I've been on the council, I've been a little wary of some of this, and I've argued this, for 6 years now. But in general, I think I agree exactly with what you said, where, these are good tools when used appropriately. And you were making the case that Utah in general uses these appropriately. And where, I think where we would draw the line on what's appropriate and what's, unnecessary might be, we could have a discussion on that. But I absolutely agree with that these tools can be very important in the right circumstances. But I do hope we always, and I know you guys see this, so I just want to encourage it, but always keep the eye on the goal. What are we trying to do overall? I think you said it well with Duncan. We didn't put together the biggest package incentives, but it was because we had such a high quality of life, and some of that quality of life comes through the services that we provide, which are funded through our taxes. And we've got good schools because we, in part, we have to fund those schools in order to have them, and things like that. And so, yeah, I hope that we don't, that we're focusing on making sure that we're providing the best quality of life, and then we can compete without necessarily giving away the money that we use to help provide that good quality of life.
No, and I think you'd find us agreeing with you 100%. I mean, from a purely philosophical perspective, if you took, I'll just tell you, I have said for years and years and years, one of the biggest disservice that we have done as state-run government is not figure out a way to redistribute sales tax so that it's not based so heavily on point of sale. And if we would have the courage as a state to do that, then communities that decided they wanted to be a bedroom community and they didn't want the impact of heavy commercial development would be able to afford to do that, because they would still get the needed taxes that they need to pay for their infrastructure, their law enforcement, their services within their community. But because we don't do that, because we haven't had the courage to do that, it places a burden on us as community leaders to identify what our needs are and to try to capture an appropriate amount of those taxes so that we can fund the services to keep our city running the way it should. And believe me, philosophically, I understand the dilemma, for example, of saying that term limits should be imposed. And I believe that strongly. And if we as the state of Utah say we believe that so strongly that we're going to enforce term limits on all of our federal representatives, that's great. That's a great moral position. But it weakens our ability to represent Utah if nobody else in the country has done the same thing. And sales tax is kind of the same way. It's unfortunate that the sales tax is the way it is, but until the law is changed so that everybody participates, for us to take the moral position of saying, we don't believe in participating in that because we don't think it's an appropriate use. We just place ourselves at a disadvantage to be able to compete for services and tax dollars that we need. And I mean, I think the West Side grocery store is a perfect example. That's obviously a vacuum that the market hasn't filled on its own, that we may have at some point to do something to kind of encourage that, because the last thing that we would want to see is for that facility to go in Southwest Orem, for example, and meet the needs of the West Side community, but us not get any of the benefit of the sales tax, but still have all the burden of all those traffic patterns driving on our roads to get to that facility. So I agree with you. At some point, you have to find the balance of what level is appropriate to play at and still feel good in our conscience about have we done the right thing or not.
I'm heartened to hear you say that. I really appreciate it. One final thought. I attended a presentation. I attended a conference, and there was a presentation. It wasn't directed necessarily to government leaders. It was more, it was done by a commercial developer, and was just going through, you know, kind of the steps of development. And I think there were 5 main steps, and you know, you need to get the option on the land. You need to entitle the land. You know, some of these major steps for development, and one of those was you need to secure tax incentives. It was part of the checklist. And so I think it has gotten to the point, and I agree with what you're saying, and it's kind of a game that is played, and it really hurts if you're the only one in the community not playing the game. But just it's just a default part of the development process now. And so I think we have to be very thoughtful that we're not just giving it because it's part of someone's checklist, but it actually is making a difference, and you know, for a development that otherwise wouldn't happen. And I heard you say that earlier, but I just wanted to reemphasize.
Oh, and I agree 100%. I've heard a similar presentation, but one of the leading comments that really impressed me was, if on that checklist that you just mentioned, the number one priority for the project is incentives, it's probably a deal we don't want. You know, if incentives are a checkbox down the list that they feel like they have to address, that's appropriate. If it's the decision driver, then there's a bigger issue behind that corporate move that we may not be able to prop up. If it's solely dependent on our ability to financially bridge their gap, then you know, we probably don't want to be in that position. And so I think, yeah, it probably is a checkbox that's not going to go away in the future. We just don't want it to be the first one.
Okay, we're way over time already on our first item. So Ms. Ellsworth, if you have a question that doesn't need an answer right now, is it possible to do it later, or do you want to just pose the question and get an answer offline?
I had a brief comment.
All right, make it, if you can be brief, thank you.
Yeah, so I have done professional work around incentives, and there's kind of 2 different buckets of incentives in terms of objective. One is for physical capital, and the other is for human resources, right? Of which thing you're incenting or supporting. And my slant is that we should be incenting job creation and human resources. And my second brief comment is that if we have to pick between incentives that attract businesses, that expand existing businesses, or that support the creation of new businesses, I would most support the expansion of existing businesses over the attraction of new businesses, because that's going to be more sustainable. I think we'll get more ROI. So thanks for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Walter and Mr. Morey, for your presentations. And I'm sure there will be further conversation about this. We appreciate all the good work that you are doing to help stimulate the economic health of our community.
Well, thank you. If you've got questions or you want to kind of drill down on any of that, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're more than happy to sit down with you and talk about whatever you'd like.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, we'll turn over to item number 6, which is a presentation regarding how to run an effective meeting, keep people on time. We're already 10 minutes over, so we're going to turn it over to Cliff Strachan, who can teach us how to do this.
So with that, George, we'll skip down a few. I'm just kidding. Let me share my screen. Several months back, Councilor Harding raised this question, and we've had in the back of our minds to share this with you for some time. I hope you can see that screen now. And okay. Somebody confirm you can actually see the presentation. Okay. So the topic is running effective committees, and getting there, I wanted to just talk about your role as council and some of the challenges that impact the council's work, and some of the responsibilities. So I've used a number of sources. One of the sources I used, you can't see on screen, is a book called The On-Target Board Member. And the On-Target board members had 8 items that it covered and talked about the responsibilities of a board member. And a council, of course, is a board member for the organization of the city corporation. So your job is to act on behalf of the owners, the residents, and the businesses. Know your jobs, get educated on them, set targets, identify the risks the city faces, learn to delegate the work, assess performance, practice discipline in what you do, and then report back to the owners, which ways the city do to our residents. Council powers essentially are to legislate and pass ordinances and appropriate and review administration items. Council may make changes and adopt functions within departments, may make suggestions and recommendations to city staffers, but you can't direct, and that'll come up. You can appoint committees to investigate things. You can make rules for the governance of the council. Those are found in the Council Municipal Policy Handbook. And you can take any action under the general police power. And one of those that you've done relates to the COVID-19 response ordinance that we'll be talking about a little bit later today. You may not direct or request the appointment or removal of a person to or from the executive office except in writing. You can't interfere with the executive officer's performance of the duties, and you can't give orders to a subordinate of the mayor. Now, councilors represent the city and act as a body. A council majority is required for any action, and that means even if you have 5 members showing up at a meeting instead of the 70, you still have to have 4 approve an action of the council. And so the question comes up, the council's committees generally have 2 or 3 members, and we'll get to that a little bit later. And part of that reason, I'll get to it now, part of the reason is so that we can have discussions that are very important to discussions and do some research and talk about things that we might not want to have out in the open, but give us an opportunity to explore even crazy ideas as we try to come up with solutions for things that are important to the city. But the more important matter in my mind is that by only having 2 or 3 members, the committee itself can't direct to the council or direct for the council what a policy decision that has been made. By recommending by majority of the council committee coming back to the council, you have the opportunity to vet it at the full council and then get a majority decision one way or the other. One of the committees you have is council leadership, both in terms of the role of the council chair and the vice chair, but they meet as a leadership committee at least every week, and we discuss a variety of things and set agendas and communicate with the administration on various things. That's set out in your policy handbook. When council members have requests for information, work through your chair, your executive director, or your committees. And the committees are going to be very important to how you get things done. We haven't really had a problem in the last 6 or so years that I'm aware of any one council member overburdening the council staff, or sometimes we get close with the mayor staff, but the idea is that we try to manage the work. And so typically on any given task that we do or any request that we do, we balance it with all the other requests that we're dealing with. And one of the things in terms of how we've structured things in our office is that any committee, the policy analyst that's assigned to a committee, if there's work that comes out of that committee, they're automatically engaged to do that. Now, that said, if the committee was asking for too much taken up all that analyst time, we'd have to revisit that. But so far, it's been working quite fine. Similarly, we have when we have requests of the administration staff, the basic understanding is that readily available information from departments can be requested, even if you want to do it directly. But sometimes some of the things that we have to do, whether it's a requirement to review the general plan or for a committee to work on something, if the workload is sufficient, if the job or the task that's being asked is too high, the mayor can actually request that the council do it by a motion. Now, in my recollection, I think that's only happened once or twice in the time I've been here. But generally what we've done is when we have a big ask or a big task to go to, I'll end up meeting with Wayne or the mayor and kind of running through the request and see what we can accomplish together. And that has worked us quite fine. So just as council members, just a reminder that pay attention to what it is you're asking, and be sure not to overburden any individuals on the staff, and work through the chain of command, so to speak, and help us accomplish things together. So now onto the effective committees part. Bain and Company had a couple of quotes in one of these sources that I will quote at the end, but Bain and Company said that at their best, committees are an efficient way of assembling people. They facilitate debate on important issues, and they can be effective forms for decision making. The challenge is to manage committees well. Notes dysfunctional traits. Committees can benefit from some of the same approaches that make board meetings more effective. An overview by the committee chair at the beginning of each meeting, a strategic focus for discussions, prioritized agendas, calendar of committee meetings and decisions, consent agendas, and evaluation of committee meetings. In essence, that paragraph is the rest of the presentation. But we'll move through it. So probably the first step in doing a committee is to get ready to focus on the purpose, designate a name, and a mission statement is one of our requirements for the council. Determine whether it's a standing or an ad hoc committee. And I broadly characterize these as advising something that's ongoing versus something that you're trying to get done. And I can think of a number of committees that we've done that are ad hoc. In fact, most of them are. And that's because you face a particular issue and you want to get it addressed. Walking, parking is, even though it's taken a while to get through the complex issues, the understanding is eventually when the council decides on something, that committee likely goes away. That's the nature of our ad hoc committees. Committees work when it's clear what the purpose and mission is. One of the things you want to do is get knowledgeable and prepare. Do your homework as committee members and as a chair. See the whole picture. Don't just get focused on one possible solution, but look at broad solutions and see what's possible. It's also important to consider what's been done in the past. What is the history of this issue in the city? Have we had other committees look at it? Have we had other policies? Did they work? If there's a committee already in place, if you're coming in as a new chair, a new member of a committee, it's good to talk to the old members of the committee and find out what's been happening. Committees don't work when they're based on bad information. So get out there and get good information. And one of the things we do is we task one of our policy analysts to sit in with every committee and be your workhorse in terms of getting the materials that you need, managing the timing of meetings, those kinds of things. So Provo City Council's method of creating a committee under our policies. You vote to designate a name and a mission statement of the committee. A designation is a standing or ad hoc. You appoint the voting members of the committee and select a chair and a vice chair. This committees may invite private citizens to provide information, advice, or counsel to the committee. We've done that very often. Some of our committees have been a mix of private citizens and the council. What we try to do, though, is avoid having staff be members of the committee, but rather there to support and advise the committee. Generally, what we've done is we've set up committees. It's customary for us to obtain agreement from the administration for administration staff to participate with the committees. And they've been very generous in all respects of having departmental staff work with our committees to get the information and help us work through the problems we're trying to understand. And then committees need a majority vote of the voting members to recommend action to the whole council. And very often what the committees have actually tried to do is more than majority. They've tried to obtain a consensus, and very often that's worked. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we've had to go back to the council and get some guidance. But for the most part, I think the committee system that we have in the city has been working for us and serving us well. These are some of the committees that the council has, as well as some city boards that you might find yourself sitting on. And just be aware that different boards and committees and commissions might have different styles of how they manage things. But what we've tried to do here now as we move forward is really talk to you about some best practices. Go forward. Okay, that's where we were. So, members and staff, it's important to make clear what's expected of the members of a staff. When you're for a chair or someone on the council who's trying to was considering asking for a committee to be created, you might want to think about what skills are needed. What professions would be helpful? Do you want to bring people from inside and outside? Do you want to who on the council might have some expertise that you might want to be specifically on that committee? If you've got an existing committee and you come on there, you might want to review who's staffing it, who's member, who on the committee are there from the public or from the council. Do you have the right people? Do you need to make changes to it? Committees don't work if there's poor involvement of the members or of the staff. And one thing to remember is, staff are paid to be there, and council members are essentially volunteering to be there. But whenever you bring in people from the outside, they're volunteering and they're coming at their will. So always be grateful for their effort and appreciate them and recognize them for their contribution. In terms of running meetings, this starts out as a discussion for the chair. The chair comes in. What kind of tone do you want to set? Do you want to sit at the top of the table or the middle of the table? There's an element of formality from sitting at the head and informality from sitting at the middle. Think about the rules that you want to have. How will the committee operate? Will you have formal rules or informal rules? And I think the more formal the body, the more formal the rules tend to be. In terms of behaviors, you're dealing with people. How are you going to deal with people who are being late, who come not prepared, or for some reason take over a meeting? As a chair, how do you want to consider those things? And then one of the things that really matters to the good function of a meeting is for the chair to make sure that the rules are followed, but also for the membership of that committee, that body to follow the rules and be cooperative in doing so. Committees work when the chair is effective, has confidence in the members, puts the committee's success over their own, and can draw on the best efforts. The reason that this committee's success over their own is sometimes we'll have someone on a committee, whether it's the chair or the originator or somebody on the committee who has their own agenda, and sometimes that can override or seemingly override the efforts of the committee. And I think it's a very important, in the materials that I read, it's very important to put personal agendas aside and try and seek for the best solutions that the committee is set up for. But be sure the purpose is clear, understand what the objectives are and what the time frame that you're working in. Have a written agenda. Agendas guide meetings. To the extent you have a lot of items to go on your agendas, prioritize them. Make sure the agenda is out before the meeting date so people have time to prepare. Make sure each person knows what they're responsible for. Keep it manageable. Start and end on time. Take minutes or notes. Share those. Capture the discussion, the actions, and the assignments. Distribute as soon as possible after the meetings. Staff in our committee structure do the minutes and the notes, and they do distribute them to all the council members so you have an idea what's going on. But whether it's an individual meeting or the whole process of working through a committee's lifespan, if you will, it helps to have a strategy thought out from the beginning to the end. You may have to make adjustments from time to time, but that's all right. Committees work well when meetings are run well and when the participants participate. I like this statement. Always end with an action plan, and maybe use the last few minutes of every meeting to figure out what's next. And one corporate exec had this acronym WWDWBW, who will do what by when. Know who's doing what by when, and make sure they know what they're doing and that they agree to do it. Another book that I went through was Death by Meeting. And the executive summary of that book basically said meetings are boring and ineffective because they lack drama and contextual structure. Now, what they meant by drama is, if you think about movies, movies usually aren't interesting to you unless there's some kind of conflict that has to be resolved in the meeting or in the movie. And they're not saying have fights and things like that, but the free exchange of ideas and the willingness to challenge each other and to challenge conventional thought and come up with ways of thinking about the issues you're dealing with, that's helpful. Have a hook. What is it that you want people to engage in, and get them in there and give them real-time permission to disagree and to challenge. The problem of contextual structure just happens to be sometimes we have very uniform meetings. You might want to have different types of meetings, whether it's a short check-in once in a while, once a week, or a tactical meeting that's maybe just the chair and the policy analyst to figure out what's next. I'm seeing those happen informally in our office on different things. But do we sometimes on our standing committees, do we sit back and look at strategic, kind of a monthly strategic, even a quarterly strategic review of what we're trying to accomplish? So those are some suggestions there. Harvard Business Review had an article online that talked about how to run a meeting. And again, I think it summarizes all of these things, right? Deal with the subject, make sure, bring people back time and time again to what the objective is when we get off on tangents. I like this phrase, control the garrulous. Discourage long speeches, encourage brevity. Draw out the silence. Different people have different styles, bring them out into the process. Don't go meeting after meeting and not hear from the silent partner in the room. Get them to participate, because many times they're silent and maybe they're shy about bringing up their ideas, but their ideas matter. Protect the weak. Often there is, in a lot of committees and even staff, especially at the staff level, say, there are differences in power structures. You might have sorry, Wayne, you might have the CAO in a meeting or the mayor in a meeting, and you might have someone lower in the meeting, a subordinate role, who might not be willing to speak up and challenge the conventional thinking, right? And so those who are in charge need to be cognizant of those that are subordinate, and make sure that to get good decisions and good input, to make sure that they engage those people who may or may not be willing to speak up. Encourage the clash of ideas. Watch out for the suggestion squashing reflex. That, sometimes an idea comes up and people, instead of battering the idea, they actually batter the person that's given the suggestion. But be open to them and at least consider them. Very often, most of you have been in meetings where whatever the senior person in the room wants is what the senior person in the room gets, and so be careful of that. Go to them last, and again, close on a note of achievement and follow up. That was just kind of on the individual meeting basis, but it also applies to the continuing progress of the committee. Communicate often, provide updates and progress, share new information as things come in. Do we have all the facts? Ask that question. Put the committee, talked about the committee in personal agendas, encourage creativity, enable everyone to contribute. And then this I think is very important. The one thing that people who don't necessarily like government often complain about is that we create committees or departments, or we create something and it never goes away. With a committee, think about the timeline of it, and when the task is done, the goal is done, the objective is done, seriously consider whether it's time to close down the committee, or whether it needs to exist for reviewing things, whether it needs to come back and do some refinements. Consider also how the organization will track success or failure of something that the committee has created. And then preliminary to that is, what is the decision-making process? I already explained, what the council's is, but whether it's a committee at the work level or say a council committee or whatever, different committees often have different structure. It might be one person looking for advice, and therefore it's their decision. Some committees might have a majority rule, or as I mentioned, our committees tend to like to try for consensus. Remember that committees work when the committee is accountable, and when members know what is expected, and when the product is expected. Those are, and I've rushed through them to try and meet your timeline. These are the sources and resources that I went to. Thanks for people who on staff who shared some of these with me. Do you have any questions, either now or later?
Thank you, Cliff. Any questions for Cliff? Will we be able to get a copy of this presentation? I think that might be helpful.
Yeah, it'll be in the minutes, but I'll also just email it out to each of you.
Okay, Ms. Ellsworth.
Yeah, I'm curious if staff has any feedback they'd be willing to share on how we could implement this as a council. Do you have any targeted feedback?
I think that could be something that might be very helpful to discuss in the individual committees in our next committee meetings, if you wanted to take a few minutes.
All right, well, thank you very much, Mr. Strachan. That was very helpful. Good for all of us to remember. There's several things in there that I want to go back over and review. I think that was helpful for me. So thank you for taking that time and for doing that research. We will now turn to item number 2. So again, we're going a little bit out of order on the published agenda. This is a presentation on regarding budget carryovers from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2021, and this will be presented by David Mortensen, our budget officer. And do I see Mr. Mortensen?
John Borgett is here. He's also one of the presenters.
All right, Mr. Borgett, are you our?
It looks like David's now on board. I can see him on the screen here. So
Great. Looks like he's.
Yeah, I apologize about that. I wasn't a panelist in the meeting, so now I am. So yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. We have something coming up on the screen to show you this year's carryovers. So this is budget that was appropriated in the past that is needed by departments for various reasons in fiscal year 21. So we'll be carrying it over from the fiscal year 20 budget to the fiscal year 21 budget. For those that have seen this presentation in the past, one thing you'll probably notice right off the bat is that there's some color on this page. So we've added some color to give you a little bit more information, hopefully. Let's see if I can get control of it. There we go. So the key there is up at the top. So as we go through the document, you'll be able to reference this key and kind of see what category each of these carryovers falls into. So the key includes encumbered, things that are encumbered on a purchase order. In green, these are things that have been pretty much widely accepted in the past that they would be carried over. There hasn't been much debate or discussion on them. The yellow color are things that are related to ongoing jobs, projects, programs, or commitments that the city has. And then the orange color are other critical equipment needs of the city. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through each line item for each department, but this is available to you if you want to review more detail and ask questions about these detailed carryovers. Please feel free to reach out to me or anyone in finance to ask those questions, and we'll get them answered for you. But just to give kind of a quick overview of each of the various departments, and then we'll total them up for the general fund and talk about comparisons to last year and kind of the process that we went through this year and how it's different than last year. I will mention first that as far as the process, we tried to be a little more tough on carryovers this year. Excuse me. We asked departments to really whittle it down and only submit to us what they feel they absolutely need in the new year because of the economic environment and the uncertainties due to COVID-19. We felt it important that we kept carryovers to a minimum. So ideally, most of the carryovers will be things that were already encumbered on the purchase order, and we needed to pay invoices in the new year, and so the budget needed to be carried over. In other instances, it's maybe an ongoing project that has previously been approved and appropriated by the council that's still ongoing, and maybe it hasn't been put on a purchase order yet, but it's still a commitment that the city has made and needs to follow through on. So that being said, we can go through each of the departments and kind of give a general total for each of those. So the council office submitted a little bit more than this, but we narrowed it down and got it down to what's really required. So you can see here, 17,189 is the total being carried over. And that's out of a total available budget of just over 75,000. So the amount that we'll be adding to fund balance is just over 58,000. I will also note that our numbers haven't been audited yet. Our audit is coming up here in a couple of weeks and will be ongoing through the fall. So some of these numbers are subject to change as far as how much is being added to fund balance, just because as we're audited and our auditor may find things or we may find things that need to be corrected, some of these amounts could change slightly, but we try and get them as close as we can for this presentation. Moving on to the mayor's office, there's only one thing requested. It's a purchase order in the amount of 21,000, and they have 45,000 in budget remaining. So it's looking like 24,000 will be added to fund balance from the mayor's office. The recorder's office, this is one of those annual carryovers that we just pretty much do regardless. Sorry, I went too far there. There we go. So the recorder's office, this is the elections budget. So for consistency in our budgeting, we try and budget about the same amount each year for elections, knowing that every other year there is a bigger election. And so we carry over the remaining funds from the smaller year to be used in the bigger year. So fiscal year 21 being a big election year, anticipating more expenditures, we're carrying over these amounts for that. The recorder's office does have about almost $84,000 in budget remaining. So even after carrying over this election money, we'll have about 27,000 going to fund balance. Human resources didn't request any carryovers. They didn't have any open POs that needed to be paid. So they're adding about 35,000 to fund balance. Keep going too far. Okay, finance, a couple of things. There's our internal audit function. We have our internal auditor that has been looking at P cards this year. The majority of that work has been done in fiscal year 21, and we haven't paid him yet. So that's what that carryover is for. And then indigent defense is another one of those annual carryovers that we would typically do. So overall, the finance department has 76,000 remaining and will be adding about 48,000 to fund balance. The legal department had no requests, and so the entire 29,000 that they have remaining will be going to fund balance. Community and neighborhood services had a few requests related to ongoing commitments and projects. Overall, they have $233,000 in budget remaining, and they're asking for just over 100,000 to be carried over. So proposing to add about $130,000 to general fund balance there. Development services has no requests. Their remaining budget is small, so it's not a big impact, but they will be adding about $7,500 to fund balance at the end of the year. Economic development had quite a bit of budget savings during the year, and they're only asking for $7,000 for this matching landmarks grant. So out of their $353,000 of budget remaining, it's looking like $346,000 will be going to general fund balance, which is great. Information systems, just one really small PO for an invoice that needed to be paid, but the remainder of their almost $350,000 is going to fund balance. In the fire department, the only thing we're carrying over is the wildland appropriation. So this is funds that the fire department receives from other jurisdictions for fighting wildfires in their jurisdiction. It involves both overtime pay, some equipment, as well as capital project or capital equipment costs that will be carried forward and used in the new year. So after that, they're rolling about $41,500 to general fund balance. The police department had a few critical needs as far as equipment, some other programs and incentives that they would like to continue. So they're requesting just under $85,000 in carryover out of the $805,000 in budget remaining. So they're contributing about $720,000 to fund balance at the end of the year. Our streets division had a few purchase orders still opened and needed to be paid, as well as an ongoing project regarding the salt shed that needed to be completed. So they're requesting $127,000 out of $177,000, and looks like we'll be adding just under $50,000 to fund balance. And engineering, they have a project that's ongoing for $46,000 traffic operating center project, and then just a small PO that needed to be paid. Their remaining budget was $143,000, and after their carryovers, they'll be contributing $96,000 to fund balance. And the Parks and Recreation Department, primarily these are purchase orders that had been opened up but not fully used and needed to be carried over. And then the very bottom one, that large $390,000 item, is the annual carryover that we do for their rec center capital equipment and their facility budget. The next category is general services. I'm sorry, I should mention that in Parks and Recreation, their total budget remaining is $1.6 million. And based on their carryovers, we're looking at adding just over $1 million to fund balance. This is due in large part to Scott and his staff and their efforts to minimize their spending once the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Knowing that they would be short on revenues, they committed to cut back on their expenses, and this is the result of that. So that was great to see as well. The next category, general services, this is kind of a catch-all, non-departmental category. So this is where we see things like miscellaneous employee recognition, innovation fund awards, tuition reimbursement, and then vehicle replacement budgets for all general fund departments. So these are just, like I said, the green areas are universally agreed upon carryovers in the past. So we're carrying these over again into fiscal year 21. There are some other miscellaneous things in general services that we're not carrying over. So we're still adding just over $300,000 in budget to fund balance at the end of the year. So in total for the general fund, we're looking at a total carryover number of $1,951,332. And there is just over $5 million in budget remaining. And so what that means is we're proposing to add to fund balance the amount of approximately $3.3 million, which is a great thing to see. In the past, what's happened with that remaining balance is it's been split 50-50 between general fund balance and adding to the mayor's employee recognition or innovation fund money. But this year, because of the environment and because of everything we've discussed, we felt that it was more important to add as much as possible to fund balance instead of splitting those. So the entire amount of that $3.3 million is going to fund balance and not being split into any recognition or incentive programs. And then just for comparison, sorry, I went too far again. In the gray box there, just a comparison of last year's carryovers. So you can see the effort that was made to cut down on carryovers this year. Last year's total for the general fund only was just over $4.4 million. And so when comparing that to our 1.95 million this year, a difference of about $2.5 million that we have narrowed things down and really cut it to what we feel is necessary. With that, are there any questions about general fund carryovers or anything at this point?
Mr. Harding has a question.
I've got a quick question and then a comment. I guess it was, I don't remember how many months ago it was, but into the pandemic, when we realized that it was going to kind of throw many of our forecasts out the window, there was an effort that all departments, including the council office, participated in, where we went through and said, okay, we said we asked for this much, we've got this much in our budget. How much can we reduce our budget? How much can we reduce and not spend money? Let's find ways where we can really cut back. Are those numbers reflected in here when we say that we have, I don't remember what the council office is, but when we have 70,000 left, does that include the 50 or so that we identified that we would not spend, or is that separate from this?
Yeah, so all of these amounts that you see in the far right column that are amounts going to fund balance, those do include those commitments from different departments. So for the interest of simplicity on this report, I didn't show all of that, but there was about $785,000 identified by various departments within the city. And I think 750,000 of that was in the general fund. So all of that becomes part of this 3.3 million that's being added to fund balance at the end of the year. Okay. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, no, thank you for helping me understand that properly. In the budget document that was passed for fiscal year 2020, did we have that 50-50 split? Does it just authorize the mayor to
yeah, it's in the ordinance. It authorizes it to happen, but it doesn't have to happen.
Okay,
if that makes sense. So the mayor and her office are deciding not to do that this year. Okay,
great. And I was just going to offer if I imagine the council would be very cooperative if something legislative needed to happen, but it doesn't sound like that's necessary.
Yeah, the balance in that account, this employee recognition ongoing incentives, is the account that would have gone into. It was carrying about a $480,000 balance already, and the incentives that have been paid out of it recently haven't been nearly that high. So in discussions just yesterday with the mayor's office, we felt like $150,000 was appropriate to carry forward for that use, and then another $120,000 for innovation funds. But the rest of that we didn't feel like would be used in the near future, so it's appropriate to send it back to fund balance. So,
thank you. All right, and then for my statement, I'll get up on my soapbox maybe a little bit here, but the money that is budgeted through this long process that we go through every year is to provide money to our departments to provide the services that they are tasked to provide for our residents and other community members in Provo. And from just about everything I hear, on the whole, our city provides amazing value to the community members, and we provide kind of world-class service in many instances, and just great services, great level of service, and we often do it at with very high level of value, meaning that we get a lot of value for what we invest into it. And to see these numbers, it looks like, particularly with recognizing the difficulties of operating in a pandemic, that our employees really stepped up and looked for ways to provide those services even more efficiently. And so I think what we see on our screen is really a result of the dedication and hard work of many employees throughout the city organization, and great leadership by our department leaders and the administration. So, these numbers are very encouraging, and I know we're not looking at the revenues, which are also affected by the pandemic, but I think this is a great reflection of the commitment that the Provo City employees have to provide that value for the tax dollars that our community members invest. So I really, hats off to everyone. I really appreciate it. I know that carryovers has been something that we've been discussing between the council and the administration, and I guess I have some thoughts on the differences between your color codings. I think those are very helpful, and but perhaps it's more appropriate to talk about some of that in the committee meetings. But I guess the overall takeaway is just great job for you and your office. Great job for the administration, and then great job for just kind of everyone across the city organization.
Thank you. So that is the general fund. I know we're short on time, if not already out of time. There are other departments or other funds in the report. So in the interest of time, I won't go over all of those, but just encourage you on your own time to review this document and come to us with any questions that you have. But they're all in a similar format. They'll show you what the carryover is, which category we designated it to be in, with the total amount of the carryover, the total amount of budget that they had to carry over, and then what's remaining. I'll just show you a total at the end of this one for all city funds except for capital improvement funds. So this is just all of our operating funds and accounts. The total carryover is 13.485 million, and out of an available budget of just over 28 million. So there will be $14.7 million of unused budget that will be going back to various fund balances of the various funds. And then with that, we also have our CIP carryovers. There's not a whole lot to discuss with this, so it'll be really quick, but we pretty much just carry over everything in the capital improvement funds to be used on these multi-year large projects that are going on. The largest of which you can see at the top here is our general CIP, which would include the city center project. That's the big $64 million carryover there. Various road projects in D&C and engineering CIPs, Parks and Rec projects of about $7.5 million. All the enterprise fund capital improvements that are ongoing. The one thing to point out is that you'll notice this $9 million in wastewater CIP that is not being carried over. I just wanted to explain that in case there was any questions. In the fiscal year 20 budget, we budgeted $9 million for a state loan that we anticipated receiving during the year. But that loan ended up not coming in fiscal year 20, but instead either has come or will come in fiscal year 21. And that $9 million was budgeted for again in our regular budget process. So we made sure to leave it out and not carry it forward. So that's the outlier on this report as you're looking at it, just so you know why that's there. Everything else is 100% carried over for a total capital improvement project carryover of $126,542,787. And then just leaving that 9 million, as I mentioned. So with that, I think we're out of time, but if there's any other comments that people wanted to make or questions, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mortensen. We appreciate it. And Mr. Borgett, we appreciate your work. Did you want to make a comment, Mr. Borgett?
If I could just make one brief comment. I just wanted to let the council know that as we met with administration yesterday, and as we've worked with them on the carryover, that this is a very conservative recommendation. I really feel that the administration has stepped up as far as dropping all the money into fund balance in the general fund. That'll put us in a real good position going into the next year, as well as the impacts and the uncertainty that we have with COVID-19. And so I would just say this is a very fiscally sound recommendation. It's a huge direction in these difficult times. So I just want to applaud the administration and just make sure and let the council know that there was a lot of effort and thought went into this. And this, it may still seem like there's a number of things on here, but this is very lean and a very good recommendation. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Mr. Borget. We appreciate you, and Mr. Mortensen. Thank you so much. All right, I'm sure if anyone has any questions to follow up with you, though, you'll be willing to help us out. So thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, we'll move on then to item number 3, which is a presentation regarding Best Friends Animal Society's Community Cat Program. And this will be, we have a guest, Lydia LaSalle, who's the Executive Director of Best Friends Animal Society in Utah, who's joined us for this meeting. We appreciate you being with us.
Hello, and I also have Arlen Bradshaw with me.
Yeah,
Welcome.
Can you guys hear us all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much to the council for your time today. We very much appreciate this opportunity. My name is Arlen Bradshaw. I serve as a senior advisor on community relations for Best Friends Animal Society, and I also serve in local government on the Salt Lake County Council. So I'm used to sitting in your chairs to some degree. And a lot of what we do here at Best Friends, if you're not familiar with us, we are a national nonprofit, but we are based in Kanab, actually in Southern Utah as our national headquarters. But we also run a pretty robust program here in Northern Utah. And our primary goal is working with animal shelters across the country, both municipal and private, on helping to implement programming to lower euthanasia rates and support people and pets. So, Lydia.
Yeah, hi. I'm the Executive Director of the Salt Lake City office. So with Best Friends, we're a national organization. So one of the brick and mortar facilities we have is in Salt Lake City. So I lead all the relationships that we have with the shelters in Utah to implement programming, like Arlen said, that decreases the unnecessary euthanasia of animals in shelters. With this particular, we wanted to play a video if Hannah has it and if it's working okay.
So this video is just to introduce you to the concept of the Trap, Neuter, Return Community Cat Management Program. And it features some animal control officers at a couple different shelters across the country with whom we've worked in the past.
Here at the Pima Animal Care Center, we've been doing our Trap, Neuter, Return program for about 4 years. And really since its incarnation, we've seen positive aspects in the community that continue to surprise us each and every single year. So before the TNR program, there was no programming to help mitigate these concerns, to address the ongoing complaints going on with cats in the community. And so as a result of getting such a program, it's really allowed us to change the makeup of not only our internal operations, but how we engage the community and what we're striving to accomplish.
Finding the one thing that works in the community that people are happy with, or solving problems for them. There's so much that can be said about a spay-neuter release program, especially when you're in a large agency. Taking in cats day after day, not having an outcome for cats that are, basically community cats, was not the answer. Euthanizing them was not the answer for the community. Spaying and neutering them, making sure that they're vaccinated when they're out in the community, the most logical, reasonable thing, and the safest thing for them.
In the spring of 2017, we started working with Best Friends on a pilot community cat program at our Coachella Valley Animal Campus. Within 12 months, our cat save rate had increased by 76%. This program has been so successful that we're looking to expand it into our entire Riverside shelter system.
We're seeing less cats in the shelter, which is great. It's not been a hard transition for animal control officers. They wanted something too. I think what it really boiled down to was what resources our ACOs could bring forth to the actual problems that are out there. Dog bite.
Cruelty to animals, barking dogs, other investigations that our department people are pressing up to get done. The more time my officers have to do these reports for, the better.
Dealing with bites, dealing with animal cruelty and neglect cases, really focusing on the things that I feel our community really wants us to be focused on.
If anything, the surprise has been the lack of complaints from the community. Because when this first comes up, many times city council members, elected officials think that it's going to be a big deal. People are going to complain because all of a sudden they're going to be inundated with these cats roaming around the neighborhoods. And that's just not the case.
I speak to people all the time, and it's like, I felt so bad for calling in. And now after talking to you, now that I know the real outcome or the possible outcome of these cats is going to be good, I feel a lot better about calling you guys. But once they hear that we have a program affiliated with us like this, it's all that better. That benefits the community, that benefits the organization, it benefits everything across the board.
Doing this has affected the community to show them that we're not the bad guy, that we don't want to pick up somebody's animal and euthanize it. We want to give them help. A cat tearing up the trash can, carrying them a deterrent. Talk with these citizens, spend more time with them, and once you spend more time with them, they see that you're not the bad guy. We care, and that's the biggest thing that they don't think that we do. So by spending time with them, showing them deterrence, I mean, they really see that we're the good guys, and it's been a good change.
Past just absolutely was not working. So working with the public is with deterrence and our basically trapping the cats and helping get them fixed has been kind of the highlight a lot of what I do.
So the biggest surprise for me with this program is really how the community has embraced it. It's really been a very big part of how the Pima Animal Care Center has expanded in the community, and it's one of our most viable programs that we currently have.
It's been great for the community so far.
Basically, I've been here 16 years, and we run ourselves to death with cat calls. Bring them in, hold the mandatory law, 72 hours, euthanize, fill them back up, a continual process. So finally, you just had to say, this is not working. So I started watching some webinars, doing some homework on TNR programs and solutions to cats. We just had to try something new, and I felt like, it may sound drastic for our community, but I didn't have any other solutions. I didn't have any other resources. It was kind of that, what have I got to lose attitude. It is definitely cheaper, and this is where you're going to be able to get some traction if you're a municipal government with your county manager or your city leaders or your commissioners or elected officials. We set up a feral day where the Spay Today clinic opened up to do as many cats as they could. So we trapped 42 cats. 21 were females. All of them were pregnant with 5 babies each. So when I did the math of what it would cost to trap, house them for 3 days, which is North Carolina law, and then euthanize, it's thousands of dollars. We paid $40 per surgery. So for under $1,000, we fixed all those animals, returned them to the community where they're already being fed. They're already getting food source. We're protecting the community, we're protecting the cats, and we're saving thousands of dollars. And I have found, especially in government, or even as a taxpayer citizen, that's where you're going to get the attention, and that's the message they're going to hear.
The return on investment for community cat sterilization is incredibly high. It reduces intake. Our intake's gone from about 25,000 just 5 years ago, and through the community cat program, we've reduced that to just over 16,000. So we've reduced the intake by 10,000 animals in just a short amount of time. We are so proud to say that our save rate is about 90% for cats, and that really no cats are euthanized for behavioral reasons, and that's because of the community buy-in. We love the program, but if our community, if the people of Tucson and Pima County didn't love it and didn't find it to be such a wonderful solution, it wouldn't be happening. And it's not only happening, but every year it's growing, and we're getting more requests for assistance.
I would like to say to other animal control officers or anybody that's skeptical of the program is to try it. Let it go on for a while, and you'll see the number of cats being impounded go down and the number of cats in the shelter go down.
There comes a point where you have to take a stance. You cannot continue to just do the same things over and over again, as I said earlier, and expect different results.
I've worked in rural areas, I've worked in large municipalities, I've worked in areas with snow, I've worked in areas with deserts, and the thing that I've seen is it works. It's really just this program is effective.
And the program really has taught me and showed me that there is alternatives to what I've always known to do with the feral community cats.
The biggest surprise is how quickly, in the scheme of things, our euthanasia numbers dropped. Also, how many citizens have thanked us.
Our community leaders really want to solve problems for constituents, and TNR and community cat sterilization offers us this really easy way to do that. And it's humane, and it's the solution that our communities want across the United States.
So thank you, Council, for watching this introductory video. You know, Lydia and I are going to use the rest of our time to kind of fill in the gaps there, provide you some additional information and some Utah-specific examples. And I did want to say, you know, we've worked for many, many years with the South Utah Valley Animal Shelter, with the Special Service District that provides sheltering for Provo City. You probably will not be surprised to know that Provo City is the highest cat intake area in the service area for SUVIS. But we want to actually engage to a greater degree with Provo City Animal Control and have the council long-term really consider the potential implementation of return to field community cat programming within Provo City. So I'm going to kick it over to Lydia.
Great. We just want to start off with what is a community cat. So per Utah State Code, a community cat means a feral or free-roaming cat, and it doesn't have any visible discernible identification, so that won't have a collar, won't have a microchip, and it's been sterilized, vaccinated, and ear-tipped. And most people will call these cats stray cats, feral cats, outdoor cats. Those are the cats that you're seeing in your community. The reason why we have community cats in the first place, a lot of that is people not fixing their animals. Perhaps some people are abandoning them when they move, or people might have lost pets. So then basically the breeding cycle starts, and then we start getting what you see, many community cats, what we call a feral colony. And I think it will move.
Hannah, it's not letting us advance the screen.
We got it 1 moment ago.
You'll have to use the mouse. It sounds like you might be trying to use the keyboard, but if you scroll, that was me changing it a moment ago. I'm going to need the mouse for just a moment to mute myself, though. I'll get back to you in about 5 seconds.
Yeah, it isn't working. Is it?
Hannah, it was working before the video, but now it's not letting us advance the slide.
Hi, sorry, I can't unmute myself when the mouse is wiggling, so I can't.
There we go. I think it's working now. Apologies.
Sorry.
Mute myself again, and I will be right back to you.
Great. Currently, South Utah Valley Animal Services, which we'll refer to, and we have been as SUVIS. Currently, the shelter right now, how the process works for outdoor community cats is the cat is picked up by either an animal control officer, perhaps a citizen has called or is bringing the cat to the shelter. It is then held at the shelter for 5 days. No one usually claims these cats. They're outdoor cats. And sometimes people don't even know that their outdoor cat is gone. And after 5 days, the cat is either euthanized, or what SUVIS has been doing is really focusing on relocating these cats through rescue support, which I will get into that relationship shortly. So that is the status quo of how community cats are being treated in the shelter. And I wanted to say too, that SUVIS has done great work in the last few years with raising their save rate, which is amazing. And that's the second bullet point there. Last year, during this time of January through August, their save rate was 79.9, and currently it's 85.2. 88%, which is just remarkable progress. And a part of that is SUVIS's leadership is really great, foster programs, and really the robust rescue community that supports SUVIS. So a part of the success and of relocating cats really comes from Utah Valley Animal Rescue. And they're a local rescue that is based in Utah County. Best Friends supports them. They're a part of our No Kill Coalition. We've supported them in the last couple of years with a kitten nursery grant, which is about $30,000 a year to help support kittens in the jurisdiction of SUVIS and also in NUVIS, so North Utah Valley Animal Services. With that, we as Best Friends, we've also had an employee embedded at SUVIS. So we have an employee that we assigned to SUVIS to help with any issues that may be coming up. A part of that is actually helping with the spay and neuter of animals. So since 2015, we've had about 2,500 animals fixed through our Orem clinic at either fee waived or reduced surgery cost. And currently we fix about 26 animals a week from SUVIS that we have been doing free of charge for the shelter for cats. And including that, we have also provided medical funds and grants to SUVIS. And that's everything from supporting microchips to microchip scanners to medical funds with a vet called Mountain West Veterinary Clinic. And that's probably upwards towards or past $50,000 is our support. So with this support with SUVIS and other rescues, including ourselves in Utah Valley Animal Rescue, we've really been able to find these different outcomes of relocating cats. However, like Arlen was saying, we really want to talk about the sustainability of this program, which we'll get into later. But right now, that is the status quo, that either the cats are there for 5 days, they are euthanized, and if the shelter, or excuse me, Utah Valley Animal Rescue or Best Friends or other rescue partners are able to take those community cats, they will then relocate them and remove them from their colony and put them in maybe a barn cat situation outdoors in a different city.
So we wanted to share with you just some quick information about the Community Cat Act, which is in state statute. It's something the legislature adopted back in 2011. It's in Title 11, Chapter 40, I believe, is where animal control statutes are located within the state code. And the Community Cat Act is permissive language that allows municipalities to apply to their animal control ordinances the ability to have a return to field program like we've been describing. And it's utilized in many communities throughout the state. And what it does is it does allow for cats to be spayed, neutered, vaccinated, and returned. And this is for cats that may come into the shelter simply as strays. So if a cat is surrendered or brought in by an owner to the shelter for whatever reason, that wouldn't be considered a candidate to be returned. But stray cats, either feral or tame, usually feral though, would be eligible for this return. And what that does is if a cat seems to be thriving outdoors, so it's healthy, it's in good condition, it's not injured, or maybe has a very minor medical issue, you can exempt the 5-day stray hold, which is a huge benefit to the shelter in particular, so they don't have to hold cats that may not have any other outcome if they don't have return to field. And, we've defined here community cat caretaker is something defined in ordinance, in the statute. We call that out primarily because a lot of this work is occurring in your community, whether you know it or not. I mean, there are people that feed community cat colonies that may be trying to trap them and get them sterilized. And what we really like to see happen in communities where this type of program is in place is that those individuals engage robustly with animal control. We feel that animal control really, we need to break down whatever barriers exist between people who care for animals and our animal control officers, because then that really does meet the purpose of why we have animal control to begin with. And from our perspective, as a large national nonprofit, but partnering with a number of local entities as well, community cat programming is one of the if not the number one program to really increase that life-saving model for a municipal animal shelter. So really quickly, we've been referring to it. You've probably caught on. It's not too complicated. And actually shout out to the Daily Herald for this graphic. It's because it's from a story that they did on community cat programming. But essentially trap, neuter, return is what this is all about. That cats are trapped either by community members or animal control. They are brought to the shelter to determine if they're eligible for return to field. And if they are healthy and again seem to be thriving outdoors, then they can be sterilized. They receive their rabies vaccination, and they get a little notch about a 1/4 inch off of their ear so that they're easily identified both by community members and animal control that that cat is sterilized, that it does have its rabies vaccination, and does not need to be impounded in the future. And this program really has started to become the norm nationwide in dealing with community cat populations. And it is expressly supported by the National Animal Care and Control Association. And you can see a quote there that they provide. And just to show you some of the numbers and some of the other communities across the state that have this programming, some going clear back to 2011 when the state first encouraged it through statutory changes. You can see Salt Lake County, which serves about half of the human population of Salt Lake County, West Valley City, Weber County, Davis County, and West Jordan. And you can see how in most cases that you start to see the cat intake decline. And of those animals coming into the shelter, the save rate increases quite dramatically. And other communities that have adopted this in recent years are Sandy, Emery County, Carbon County, South Salt Lake, Tooele City. And then of course you saw some of the national examples.
Great. So I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of the program. Well, one of them off the bat is reducing the number of animals entering the shelter system that are cats, meaning we would do targeted spay and neuter, so that prevents unwanted litters. Also with the operating costs, as you could see in the Community Cat Act, when you no longer have to keep a cat for 5 days, so that's 5 days that you're feeding, that your staff is caring for this cat, and then ultimately for that cat to be euthanized or transferred to a rescue, we get to eliminate that. It creates safer communities by reducing the number of unvaccinated cats. Like Arlen says, all the cats get a rabies vaccination when they get fixed. Also improving the life and the health and the quality of the lives of free roaming cats. Having fixed cats, again, naturally reduces that population, so you're not having unwanted litters. And a part of that, when they are fixed, a lot of those nuisance behaviors that you see your community complaining about, such as fighting or yowling or roaming, they really get significantly reduced when community cats are fixed. The other thing is with shelter employees, it can be very, very difficult to be in a situation where you have to be faced with euthanasia. And with this program as being a part of the toolbox of caring for community cats, this really helps with that you don't have to be in a situation where you have an animal for 5 days and then ultimately euthanize that animal. And we know that TNR, trap, neuter, return, does reduce the size of the colony over time, meaning we're stopping that litter, we're stopping the population, and that really does reduce that colony over time. And as we have seen in other communities, is very sustainable, and you're able to maintain that save rate and rely on this program. And not only that you can rely on rescue partnerships, but relying on this allows, having this as an option for community cats becomes a really great benefit. Usually what we do here a lot is about complainants. Those are usually the individuals that are calling, say, Suvis, or maybe calling you as individuals if they're saying, hey, we have cats in our neighborhood or on my property. So one of the things that we do in this program is that we do address these concerns with the community members. So we have the ability to do canvassing. That's the biggest thing. And I'll show our little door hanger that we use in our communities. This is really just identifying the caregivers in the community and being able to fix the cats that they have, and then identifying community members that don't want the cats in their yard. And we know that's a real issue. when we go in there and we mitigate those things, we usually find that the neighbor or the citizen that does not want the cats around, they're usually able to work with us and do humane deterrence. We have free humane deterrence that we give citizens that basically keep cats out of their yard and have them stay in their designated caregiver area. And we find that education is really the key with this. When citizens find out that these cats could die or no longer be in the community, they really don't usually want that to happen. They really want to figure out something to build that bridge between the people that care for the cats and the ones that, you know, rightfully so may not want them on their property. So I was just going to go briefly into some of the things that come up when we implement this, or questions that we have with people in shelter leadership positions. So a lot of it is complaints. So again, really saying, well, how are we going to deal with all these complaints? Again, that is really building this relationship between community members, and to know relocation is still an option. We're saying that the relocation or removing of feral cats is always an option. We've had to do that in all sorts of jurisdictions in Salt Lake County, where we will definitely do that. The wildlife is one of the things that we hear, or the fear of wildlife, meaning cats preying on birds and other wildlife. And the big thing with this is that we want to reduce the population just as much as anyone else. And we find this is a way to reduce that population so that wildlife predation can stop and be reduced. So fixing the cats, because without fixing them, they will keep reproducing. And a part of this is targeted spay and neuter. Again, if you remove the cats, which has been happening a lot, removing them from there, it just leads to more cats coming because you're not targeting the spay and neuter opportunities in that community.
We're almost at.
Sorry. I'll be quick.
If you can just help us understand what would be maybe a next step.
Yeah, sure.
So that's actually our next slide.
Yeah, we'll do that. So what Best Friends is offering is really a pilot program that we've done across the state of Utah. We usually like to do that as a minimum of 6 months. Basically helping implement any ordinance changes within the city, working with the shelter to identify high intake, high target areas to fix animals, basically provide the trapping, the vaccination, the spay and neuter, the humane deterrence, relocation, and any conflict resolution is what Best Friends would offer, and what we have done in those other communities that Arlen has mentioned.
And included in the information that you were given is actually a letter from a sheriff's deputy in Weber County that we've been working with over the last couple of years. They were one of our more recent pilot projects, and you can kind of see what he's had to say about working with Best Friends specifically, but also the community cat program in general. And I think at that, we'll just answer any questions. I know it's a lot of information, and probably not all of you ran for city council to deal with feral cat issues. But it is a municipal responsibility. And so we'd love to, again, continue this conversation and answer any questions you have right now. I did see some pop up in the chat, but
yeah,
we set up, we can't hit it.
We'll try to do these quickly. Go ahead, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, so I'm the council attorney, and I just wondered if you were aware of or knew of any ordinances currently in existence that you thought needed to be changed.
So we do have a legislative team, and we've done a look through Provo's ordinances. Your ordinances don't currently prohibit this type of activity, but we would probably have some suggestions and can follow up with you just to make sure that it's expressly allowed, and would allow us to, ensure we're engaging with your animal control officers, and so that they are also on board that this is a program that the city wants to proactively move forward.
Legislatively speaking, that would be necessary to allow this to go forward if you were to strike a deal with a pilot program?
I missed the first part of your question. But
legislatively, is that the only thing that would be needed for you to be able to implement a pilot program?
And we would ask for a memorandum of understanding, of course, because of the financial commitment. But other than that, that would be the only barrier, is just the council giving us the express permission to work with your animal control officers through an MOU.
Hello. I'm calling you back about the ambulance.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Bradshaw and Ms. LaSalle. Appreciate your, Mr. Harding, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just not necessarily questions, but everything I hear sounds good. It almost sounds too good to be true, but I'm definitely interested in looking at the next steps. It seems like perhaps we should reschedule this for another work meeting, so we can maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just we could do a lot of it digitally, but just what is in that memorandum of understanding? What does 6 months after the pilot project look like? And just some more fully understand what kind of longer term commitment we're looking at. But I'm definitely interested in looking at this further and taking that next step if it's prudent.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can provide a draft MOU that we've had with other municipalities. And I think definitely answer those questions offline and determine if we need to schedule more of your council of a whole time. But definitely will be responsive to those needs.
I would, again, this is Brian Jones, Council Attorney. I would just comment that I think in our form of government, the MOU is probably actually going to be with the administration and not with the council. So as far as scheduling, making effective use of the council's time, I don't know that the council needs to hear this again until specific legislative changes are proposed, unless the council is concerned that they don't want to approve any budgetary requests.
Yeah, and to be clear, as an entity, we as best friends will bear the financial burden during the pilot period. And, our hope is that over that time, you can determine, what, if any, changes would need to happen with ongoing funding. Maybe we extend beyond the 6 months. It's really just to kind of have that experience working together, have the city have the experience of the program to determine what longevity looks like. And that's been our experience with other cities. Some we've worked with a lot longer than 6 months. Others see the benefit rather quickly. And a lot of times it's the shifting of funding, not necessarily greater allocations. Just so you know, we do have our own spay and neuter facility just in your city to the north in Orem, where the surgeries would take place, and that's operated by our veterinarians and staff there. So it's actually, even beyond that, a very affordable way to expand spay and neuter work in Provo City.
Well, it sounds like maybe the next step is for a conversation with the administration about this to see if an MOU could be drawn up, and then if there are sort of legislative implications, if we need to tweak our ordinance to help facilitate this in some way, I think we would be happy to entertain that conversation. I think I'd been informed about this work some time ago and thought it seemed very reasonable and helpful to the community. So we thank you for your time today, and maybe recommend that you reach out to the administration, and we can be of assistance with that if necessary, and then see if we can't get something going.
Sounds
Great.
good. We'll do that.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, let's move on to item number 4, which is more animals today. We're going to talk about chicken coops now. So we'll have a discussion regarding setback requirements for chicken coops, and we're still 5 or 10 minutes behind, but we have 20 minutes allotted for this, and this was a discussion to be led by Shannon Ellsworth.
Yeah, I think we can do this in 10 minutes. Hannah, I think you're probably pulling up the PowerPoint. Let's see, there we go. Let's see if I can control this. Okay. Yeah, so I had a constituent come to me and say that they have a chicken coop and they like raising chickens and they're trying to obey the law. But in Provo, as they brought to my attention, the ordinance requires that their chicken coop be 15 feet from any property line in the backyard and 6 feet from any dwelling. So for them and most people who don't have a large farm, this puts their chicken coop in the middle of their backyard. And, the question remains, where will the trampoline go if the chicken coop is in the middle of the backyard? So I've talked to just a couple of citizens I know who have chickens or who have neighbors who have chickens or who care about these sorts of things, and I got some feedback from them. These are some of their statements. I feel that a coop with adequate space is more important than the location thereof. Someone with a corner lot said it would make sense to have a coop just a few feet away from the fence between my yard and the neighbor's yard. The property line setback requirement does make sense for creating distance between the coops and streets and public sidewalks. It doesn't make sense for fence lines and with alleyways or right-of-way access easements. Other citizens said, I think they should be allowed right up to the property line if a largely opaque fence separates the properties. And the last, my take on backyard chickens is a lot like dogs and cats. No one regulates where I put a doghouse on my property, as they shouldn't with a chicken coop. So my proposal to the council is that we can remedy this for citizens who want to obey the law and who want to have a legal chicken coop in their yard. And my hope is that we would send it to the staff and the planning commission. They can come up with a better setback measurement and present us with a number or a recommendation, and we can approve that at a later date. Any questions? George, I think you're muted. Are you talking?
Yes, I was. It doesn't happen very often that I get muted, but I did mute myself. Any questions? Mr. Shipley, go ahead.
Yeah, I just support us looking at this. I've had a lot of people on the west side tell me that if they want to obey the law on this ordinance, they really can't logistically in their backyard. And so they just either choose not to have chickens or they choose to break the law knowingly. And they'd much rather have a way to readily, obey the law, but still have their chickens, especially out here on the west side where we like chickens.
Mr. Harding.
So for a long time, backyard chickens weren't allowed in Provo unless you were in like a agricultural or residential agricultural zoned area. And I think the idea was to maybe take a baby step into it, which was allow it, but only allow it in circumstances where you really had low probability of negatively affecting the neighbors. And so I think there's something to be said that, well, maybe we should be taking a look at the next step. We took a baby step where it really had to be far away from neighbors. And if it's not causing problems, then maybe we decrease some of those setbacks and whatnot. I do think that we should be careful moving forward. We should evaluate how things have gone. My feeling, and this is mostly anecdotal, just hearing people talk and having experienced it a little bit myself, that some people they didn't have the idea, they weren't going to have backyard chickens knowing that it was not allowed, but then once it was allowed but didn't fit their backyard, kind of logistically they couldn't place it, they decided, well, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway, even though it's not meeting the restrictions that are in place. And so I think a lot of that is going on. I also think I've heard some people from the city say, hey, we really haven't had anyone call in to say that they're having problems with their neighbors' chickens. So therefore, there were a bunch of people that were worried about allowing chickens, and it turned out to be for not. But I have heard other people say, well, we haven't called the city on it. We don't like to call the city on our neighbors, but oh man, it has been, awful having neighbors with chickens. And so just because people don't call in to complain to the city does not necessarily mean that it is not negatively impacting. I don't really want in a public meeting to talk about my relationship with particular neighbors, but just I'll say in general, I've had a fairly negative experience having chickens as neighbors, kind of destroying my garden and whatnot. So there are some fairly negative impacts. There can be some fairly significant impacts. And so I like the idea of, well, what if you have a tall fence, opaque or whatever, the suggestions were. And I guess my last comment on this is just like everything else we do, where we can put in all sorts of regulations and whatnot when it's allowed and things. But if people choose not to follow the regulations, then it really doesn't matter much. What we say is required. If people say, well, hey, 15 feet is unreasonable, I'm going to ignore that, or having an opaque fence is unreasonable, I'm going to ignore that. So I'm mixed on having allowed chickens in the first place, and I'm mixed on reducing some of the regulations. So I've got mixed feelings on it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I didn't think of it this way until a friend brought it up, who lives in the northeast part of town and has raised chickens for 40 years. And she compared them to dogs and cats. And I just thought that was an adequate comparison, because there's cat and dog food out in the backyard. Dogs make more noise than cats, but yeah, it doesn't seem like it's that different, not to me. So I'd be interested again in just letting staff and the Planning Commission come up with a common sense solution. I don't think that we need a subcommittee on coop setbacks. I don't know if there's a burning desire to have a subcommittee on coop setbacks. Anybody?
That's it. That sounds like a great thing to put on your resume, though. I was the committee chair for coop setbacks. Yeah, I guess are we needing a council motion to request a draft, suggested draft from staff that would go through the Planning Commission? Is that what we're needing right now?
I'm not sure what staff would recommend. I don't think there's a motion included in the agenda. Is that right?
No, there's not, but we could make that motion if I'm correct.
Yes, you will need a majority vote in order to send any proposal to the Planning Commission, even if the proposal is just asking for a staff recommendation to move through the Planning Commission.
Okay. Mr. Harding?
I think when we talk about staff, I guess my vote on any hypothetical motion really would depend. Are we talking staff, or sorry, council staff putting this together? Are we talking community and neighborhood services staff putting something together that then they would propose to the Planning Commission? I would support more of the latter rather than the former. And then also, are we just asking them to take a look at this issue, or are we kind of more directing them to find less restrictive setbacks?
Well, I guess that depends. Thank you for that clarification. I think that depends on who wants to make the motion, right? But I think Mr. Harding's outlined some things that probably would be helpful to get specific. And Karen Tapahi is recommending perhaps animal control or zoning compliance would be a good location for a draft of such a kind.
So zoning compliance is under community and neighborhood services, and they deal with these kinds of ordinances regularly.
Correct.
And Dave's other point of clarification was
what specifically, or if anything, are you asking to be put into the ordinance or to be looked at?
I personally think that we would serve citizens better with a looser regulation on coop setbacks.
So do you want to make that motion? Or Mr. Harding, do you have a question, comment?
I was just going to say, I would prefer that we request, whoever we ask to look at it, if we just ask them to look at it and to see if they have recommend changes to something that would be more appropriate, as opposed to directing them to find something that's looser. And if less setback is appropriate, then I trust them to come to that conclusion. That I think is what would be required for my support of such a motion.
I think we should also consider that most people don't know about this law and most people are not complying with this law if they have chicken coops. And should it stay on the books if it's not something we're going to enforce? I don't know.
Yeah, it seems to me that staff will have heard this discussion, and so I think we can just sort of direct them to consider these issues that we've raised and make some recommendations. So if you want to make that motion, Ms. Ellsworth,
Mr. Hamley,
Yeah.
this is Karen Tapahi. Mr. Parker has pointed out that animal control is the one enforcing the chicken ordinance based on complaint. So you would just send it to the administration.
Okay.
So I would move that we ask the administration and their staff to bring to the council a recommendation on chicken coop setbacks.
Okay. Mr. Sewell, did you have a question or did you want to second that?
I think the way that's worded, I would be happy to second it. I also preferred sort of a neutral look by the administration and having them give us their best recommendation based on their experiences. So.
Okay. So is that a second?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any discussion on the motion? All right. No discussion. I'll call for a vote on the motion. I'll begin. I'll vote yes. Mr. Harding?
Yes.
Ms. Ellsworth?
Yes.
And I do not believe Mr. Fillmore is here yet. Mr. Hoban?
Yes.
Mr. Sewell?
Yes.
Mr. Shipley?
Yes.
Okay, so that voting is unanimous, 6-0, with Mr. Fillmore excused. All right, we have 10 minutes for a break. So we will reconvene at 2:25. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back. We'll start up again here after our break. And we'll begin with what was item number 1 on our agenda, which is a discussion regarding possible amendments to Chapter 9.25 COVID-19 response. And just for background, this was relegated to today's meeting as a result of a prior discussion of some items in the mask ordinance that we wanted to tweak, I guess it's fair to say. And we counted on our trustee council attorney, Brian Jones, to assist us with that. And he has sent out to us some of those proposed revisions. So Mr. Jones, do you want to walk us through what those are, and then we can have a discussion?
Yes, I'd be happy to. It shouldn't take more than a couple minutes to go through it, I don't think. But as you recall from the last meeting about the mask ordinance, there were several revisions that were proposed, principally by Councillor Fillmore. At the end of the discussion there was a motion that, as I recall, was more or less, why don't we have Mr. Jones prepare a markup of any of those proposals that he thinks would be good and bring it back to us. And that was passed by the council. And so we came through, I went through and prepared the draft that's attached. Let's see if I don't have screen sharing turned on at the moment. But it might be helpful to be able to put this up on the screen if we can see it. Looks like, okay.
You should be able to share your screen now.
Okay. Let me make sure. Okay. Can everybody see that on the screen now? Okay, so here's the red line looks fairly extensive, but the changes aren't really that big. We'll start at the very beginning here in fact, let me change this. Okay, here in section 0.010, I basically just made the purpose section simpler by, because we were getting to a point where changes later in the chapter were coming into conflict with what this said. So I just proposed making this simpler and not having to worry about the two of them being compatible in every single word and exception. In section 020, there were some suggestions to make clear that this section specifically applies only in indoor public spaces. There was a suggestion that the phrase areas accessible to the public was not as clear as it could be. So we changed that. We proposed changing that to indoor public spaces and then defining what an indoor public space is and specifying that that does not mean the interior of a dwelling. As I pointed out in the email yesterday, there was a late change where the word dwelling here was changed to residing. There was a feeling that maybe it was confusing to say dwelling here as a verb and then dwelling here down here at the end of a noun. So we changed those. In section 030, all that was added were some subsection titles and a cross-reference to the exemptions, just to call those to the attention of people that might be reading the ordinance. Then in the exemption section, there was a proposed change to the medical exemption, just to make the language, there was a feeling that maybe prevents was too harsh of a standard, and so it was proposed to change the standard to not possible, reasonable, or prudent. The athletic activity, or the physical activity exemption was clarified, was also proposed to be amended to include official athletic events and training and practices at the direction of coaches and administrators. And then a new exemption was proposed that has to do specifically with individuals who are attending a large public gathering, but are addressing or performing for the public gathering and are socially distanced from the rest of the gathering. So this would include speakers, performers that maybe, maybe a singer or somebody at a heavy center performance or something like that was the idea there. Then some changes were made, were proposed to the posting requirement. One, to clarify, there was an argument that was being made on social media that this language right here meant that a business only had to post a sign if the business was one where the business owner decided that social distancing was not possible and therefore masks were required. This clarifies that any business that is in an indoor public space has to at least post the sign so that those entering can make that decision about whether or not the mask is required because of social distancing. And then the social distancing language from 020 was included here, not as a change, but again, just so that people were aware that that was the actual requirement. And then there was a technical edit here in sub 2, and those are all of the changes. Be happy to answer questions about any of those.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions for Mr. Jones? Mr. Hoban.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Mr. Jones, sorry, appreciate the work on this. We haven't changed anything in effect as far as the sunset agreement, correct? I mean,
correct.
It says, unless we amend this, but that specifically refers to that specific.
This section.
Yes, right. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I know that was something we were looking at, making sure people understood in regards to a referendum and such. So I think that was the only question I had. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Harding.
Thank you. So I support all of the proposed changes that are here. I wanted to, or I proposed a few days ago another one that would address the phrase where it talks about where social distancing is not possible, reasonable, or prudent. I feel like the intent that we had was to say more of where social distancing isn't being observed. So when we're not socially distancing, or we don't, people don't have to wear masks if they're socially distancing in those situations. And I'm not sure that's properly captured by the phrase not possible, reasonable, or prudent. I think we heard back from one counselor who was supportive of it, and I didn't hear any concerns brought up by it. But there was only one other counselor that voiced support for looking at that. So I'd like to raise that again. If there are concerns, I'd love to hear them. Otherwise, I recommend that we make that change to the language.
And I'll just jump in, I suppose, and say I'm supportive of that change. I think that from my perspective, I think that the possible misinterpretation that Councilor Harding raised is indeed possible, and that his proposed language fixes it. The only reason I didn't already include it in the draft was simply because it was a new change that was proposed after last meeting's motion, and so I felt like it was outside of the scope of what I'd been specifically asked to do.
So would that mean we would need a new motion to add that change?
Yes, I think if like right now, without any motion, then the version that I just went through with you would be on the agenda for tonight's meeting. And then, so I think your options are do nothing and have a discussion and a vote on the version I just went through tonight, make a motion to postpone or table this and not discuss it tonight, or make a motion, probably for Mr. Harding to make, but make a motion to have his proposed change added before tonight's discussion.
I'm certainly open to that, Mr. Harding.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll make the motion that we request Mr. Jones to to produce another draft to be considered within the implied motion for tonight's meeting, which addresses the stated concern about the phrase about masks being required when social distancing is not possible, reasonable, or prudent.
All right, is there a second of that motion? Mr. Sewell?
I'd be happy to second that motion, and I wanted to thank Mr. Fillmore and Mr. Jones and Mr. Harding for what I believe are some good improvements and refinements to the ordinance.
Okay, that has a second. Is there a discussion of this motion? All right, seeing no further discussion of the motion, I'll call for a vote. Mr. Harding, I'll begin with you.
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Fillmore is still not with us, correct? Mr. Hoban?
Yes.
Mr. Sewell?
Yes.
Mr. Shipley?
Yes.
And I will also vote yes. So the voting is unanimous with Mr. Fillmore excused. All right, are there any other issues pertaining to these suggested amendments that we need to discuss today or this afternoon? Otherwise, we will be voting on these suggested amendments this evening. All right, well, that was an item allotted 60 minutes. Imagine that. A mass discussion that didn't go on endlessly. So we will return to that discussion and vote this evening, and we'll move on now to item number 7. If you're following at home, we are now back to the regularly scheduled 7, 8, and 9 of our work session agenda. So we have item number 7, which is an ordinance amending Provo City Code to clarify amenity space requirements for developments with 20 or more residential units in the Interim Transit Oriented Development, or ITOD, zone, citywide application, and this will be presented by Dustin Wright, city planner. Mr. Wright.
Mr. Handy, I don't think Mr. Wright has joined us yet. We gave them an indication that this other item was going to be finished a lot sooner, and it probably beat his time as well. Can I suggest a 5-minute break while we get him on the
I wasn't thinking about that, so yeah, thank you. So we'll take a 5-minute break and invite staff to join us.
Dustin, can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear. Can you hear me?
I understand you were about 30 seconds too slow.
Sorry about that.
No, we appreciate you being ready. Is Aaron queued up to go right after you?
Yeah, he's right here too.
Sorry, Dustin. I know everybody was counting on me talking longer.
Just let me know when we should start again.
Well, we told everybody 5 minutes, so we should give them the 5 minutes.
Okay. I'm not sure I noticed exactly what time that was.
I didn't either. But I estimate we're about 3 minutes in. We have a closed meeting booked for 4. Rather than bringing everybody, rescheduling everybody that's joining us at that point, do you want to just keep it at 4?
Yeah, it's probably easiest, right?
Yep.
The only thing, Cliff, I guess, is you might want to check and see, ask Wayne or Isaac or something about that, because Isaac's original ask was for an hour. So maybe they want the extra time.
Yeah. Wayne?
Let me do some checking and find out. I'll reach out to Tara and the team and see if we can go earlier. I'll let you know.
Just catch us in the chat.
We'll do it.
Thank you. George, I think you're good to go. I think that's been 5 minutes.
All right, welcome back, everybody. And thank you, Mr. Wright, for adjusting on the fly here. We'll turn to you for, again, this is item number 7, an ordinance amending Provo City Code to clarify amenity space requirements for developments with 20 or more residential units in the ITOD zone. And this has citywide application, so go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. So this item is one that staff has addressed as something we wanted to make some clarifications to within our ITOD zone. And so we've gone ahead and taken the existing code and made some modifications to it to be more in par with our other zones that have a similar type of amenity space requirement in our downtown, for example. And so the proposed language that we have is going to change the open space requirement from being 20% of the entire lot to being more of a residential percentage. So 10% of the residential floor area is what would be the requirement that they provide. And then the other thing that our existing code doesn't have is it didn't really define what the open space was. And so we wanted to better define that by giving some examples that it would be things such as a clubhouse or a gym or a pool, which our other zones do very well. Then we've gone and we've added some criteria of what can be used for amenity space, how much of the outdoor area could be used. So we have that at 50% of the required amenity space would be outdoor, and that space has to be accumulated or contiguous so that it can be better utilized. And so the Planning Commission had a few suggestions from the proposed text that we took to them. We've made those changes, and I've passed a copy on to the council office. So hopefully you've been able to see those. They're just some minor changes. to our proposed code amendments. So if you have any questions about that, I can be happy to answer those at this time, or any other questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Any questions about these proposals from the council before we revisit this and vote on it this evening? All right. Well, thank you. I think the proposals were straightforward enough in the packet, so looks like we'll be good to go forward with that discussion and vote this evening. Thank you. Right. We'll now. Yeah, sorry, Mr. Harding, did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was a little bit late, but perhaps one question, it doesn't necessarily need to be answered now, but I guess if you already knows, how do these amenity requirements compare to like the DT1, DT2, and other zones that have them? Are they identical? Are they similar?
Yeah, so I can answer that right now. I basically pulled the text from those two other zones and applied it to this one. So we're trying to keep it uniform, and we've seen some success in those zones. So I feel like that was a good way to go.
Thank you.
All right. We'll go ahead then with item number 8, which is an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 2.31 acres at 4100 North Canyon Road and 3.42 acres at 3956 North Canyon Road from residential agriculture RA to residential R110. This is in the North Timpview neighborhood, and Aaron Ardmore, city planner, will present. Thank you, Mr. Ardmore.
Thank you. So the property is here. You can see the remnant of the RA zones, this big chunk up here, and then down here on the corner of when this whole area kind of used to be horse properties and more agricultural lots. As you can see over time, it's been subdivided into R18 and R110 subdivisions all around. So the applicant is controlling some of the property within these areas. So this portion in the red and this portion down here is what's being proposed as a R110 zone. Here is, John, did you have the updated slides? Sorry, I sent Hannah some updated slides. The applicant has worked, there we go. The applicant has worked to rework the plan since the Planning Commission. So while the Planning Commission recommended a positive recommendation on the zone change, they continued the concept plan because it failed to meet some engineering block requirements and things like that. So the applicant has come back with this plan. Still shows the cul-de-sac on the east here and on the north here, but has broken up this block length and provided, though he doesn't control these lots 15 through 32, he's shown what it could develop as in the future and connecting up into 430 East. So what he's trying to rezone right now is in this area, lots 1 through 17 and lots 1 through 9 down here. So the zoning made sense to the Planning Commission, makes sense to staff to go to R110. That's the surrounding area, the good sized lots. And then one of the other questions the applicant had was, or the Planning Commission had for the applicant, was how the street would be treated on Canyon Road. And that's why we also had those images sent over today of other projects that the applicant has done with that type of wall and landscaping and then the sidewalk. Let's see, I think they're right here. So just showing, I think he is wanting to show an example of how that could look good and be maintained and still be kind of a friendly environment for pedestrians with the backyards facing that major road. So that's pretty much all I have on the zone change. If you have any questions for me now or later tonight, I'll try to prepare for those.
Ms. Ellsworth?
Yeah, I'm curious why R110?
I think that's just kind of how the lots worked out. They're wanting some bigger lots through the area. It's kind of politically, it's easier in the neighborhood to get an R110 approved or supported than R18.
Yeah, that's part of my concern, I guess, is that we're continuing a pattern of large lot development in certain parts of Provo and a lot of multifamily consolidated in other parts of Provo, and there's not a lot of housing integration or diversity. It seems like this continues that pattern. Do you have any concerns like that?
I think in this small area, it makes sense. I don't think kind of this infill of essentially R18, R10 neighborhood with anything else would be supported really well if you went to a townhome or apartments. And the general plan just kind of speaks to the residential use of this area. So staff thought it fits the area well.
I understand. I guess I'm just not comfortable doing what we've always done. I feel like we still need housing diversity throughout the city, not just in certain parts of town. And maybe you can tell me, maybe there's other more dense developments nearby. If someone wanted to downsize, is there that potential in the neighborhood? Or if someone needed a different housing type, is there anything but single family in that area, in the immediate area?
In the immediate area, no, I don't think so. And while I agree with you in theory of mixed housing types, this area just hasn't gone that way. So that's kind of a bigger question, I think, than what's being asked for today.
Yeah, I hope that's something that we can talk about as a council, and I don't know if that's going to come up. Well, I'm sure it will come up in our general plan process, but I hope the consultant will take that seriously, and I hope we can have some meaningful policy discussions about housing types, and housing diversity throughout the city, because we're just continuing a pattern of sprawl in many areas and a pattern of low-income consolidation and economic segregation in other areas. So I think we can do better.
Mr. Harding?
I'm generally supportive of Ms. Ellsworth's comments there. I think one of the problems perhaps is that the way that our zones are set up, it kind of makes for very uniform lot sizes and encourages very uniform housing types. It would be nice if we had some more flexible zones. One way to approach that might be to go to a denser zone like an R18 or even an R16, but then perhaps with a development agreement limiting the number of lots. That way, at the very least, you could get some variety of lots. You could have some smaller lots, some smaller homes, and then some larger lots as well. And so you end up with the same number of lots, the same overall density, but at least some variety of the houses that are made. But that is kind of a kludgy solution. I far prefer to have zones that allow, if not encourage, or almost require some variety in the lot sizes and housing sizes. But that might be a bridge too far for tonight's, for this project that's before us. But yeah, I support Ms. Ellsworth's concerns and wanting to address housing variety throughout the city. In addition to that, I just wanted to mention I actually recognize the wall picture that was shown earlier, and I think that's been there for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I don't know, time flies. Not that one, sorry, that one, yeah, there. And so far it is being well maintained, and of course, 1 year of track record doesn't necessarily give us a lot of confidence that will continue to be maintained long term. But for this part of Orem, that there's a good chance that it'll be maintained well into the future.
but even though it kind of looks nice in that picture, it's not a particularly attractive treatment for pedestrians. Long walls, next to high-speed roads, parents are not going to be wild about younger children, walking down that sidewalk, getting to wherever they're trying to get, to a friend's house that's just outside of the neighborhood. So there's some problems with that. Again, I'm not necessarily going to vote no on this because of that, but that's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider, I appreciate that updated. Oh, I guess at the end, I'll ask a question. How much of this was reviewed and recommended by the Planning Commission? But the other, I know that, thank you for moving to that slide. I know that there was some discussion among the Planning Commission about the cul-de-sacs, which are, as far as best practices are concerned, are actually strongly discouraged, including in our own Provo policies. And so the southern aspect there's not too much that could be done there. So, but I appreciate that the block length has been shortened here, but by moving that connecting street kind of two lots to the east, you then get kind of a U shape rather than these two cul-de-sacs, and that might be more in line with some of the. I know this is just concept plan. I don't believe it was reviewed by the Planning Commission, but if we're looking at the kind of the policies, the stated policies that discourage cul-de-sacs, that we might be able to bring it the concept plan when it comes time to doing that into closer compliance to the Provo City policies.
To respond to that, we actually during the commission we encouraged a U track here, as well as a second street here.
Okay.
We encouraged that to the developer, and this is what he came back with. So we'll kind of wait to see what the preliminary and final subdivisions look like once they actually come in for application. But yeah.
But we're not actually approving the concept plan, correct?
No.
Okay, and also if we do approve the rezone, I hope that doesn't give the impression that we're approving of the concept plan, because I would like to see it more aligned with our policies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion or questions for Mr. Ardmore? We will, of course, have this item later this evening to discuss more length if we wish. All right. Thank you, Mr. Ardmore. We appreciate your time. We'll go on to our last item for the work session, which is a discussion regarding an update on the wastewater loan with the state of Utah, presented by Mr. Dave Decker, our Director of Public Works. And let me just announce that this item is slated for 20 minutes, and it looks like we do have staff available to begin our closed meeting as soon as we're done with this discussion. So just keep in mind that will be our plan, and that will give us a little more time between the afternoon meetings and the beginning of our 5:30 evening meeting. So go ahead, Mr. Decker. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you, Chair Handley, and thank you to the council for the opportunity that we have today to give you an update. Our purpose today is to prepare the council for an upcoming meeting, the first meeting in October. I believe it's October 6th. There will be a public hearing and an item that we will be asking the council to approve the bond from the state of Utah relative to the wastewater treatment plan. You may recall, let me give you just a quick short history on the wastewater treatment plan, and then we're going to turn some time over to our finance department and our bond attorney to review the documents that you will be asked to approve in October. But just briefly, I'll remind the council that back in late 2017, the city submitted a variance letter to the state Division of Water Quality, asking for an extension on the phosphorus regulations that would have gone into place in 2020 this year. And we committed in that letter to do certain items, including an update, a significant update to our wastewater treatment plant to enable biological removal of phosphorus at the treatment plant. And in subsequent meetings with Division of Water Quality, they encouraged us to approach their board relative to a loan, and at the direction of the council. At that time, the council and the administration was supportive of us approaching their board. In late 2018, their board authorized a $77.8 million loan. We had originally requested about $120 million, but due to the number of requests that they were receiving at that time, they could only authorize about $78 million. And that loan includes $2 million of a grant. It's loan forgiveness essentially. And so it was a very, I believe it was a very generous offer from their board. And we have presented a number of times to the council and to the administration relative to the financial plan on the wastewater treatment plant. And our design team has been working for a number of years now, probably approaching two and a half years to design the update to the treatment plant. And as it indicates on the slide that you can see, in October, we'll be asking for the council meeting to hold a public hearing and approve the loan from the state. This will be one of the final steps for authorizing us to use this loan. And we plan to close on this loan with the state and our bond attorneys in October to allow significant construction to continue forward on the treatment plant. We've actually begun construction on the treatment plant itself. These are pictures just from the last month or so of work that started. This is just demolition work on the old trickling filters. So the trickling filters were built with the original treatment plant back in the 1950s. And these are, this is the demolition work that's going on right now with the trickling filters in the area around the trickling filters. So this is the area that will be excavated for the new bioreactors and the membranes that will be installed in this location. And there's an air photo. Here's the air photo right here. You can see this is again demolition of the two trickling filters underway. A couple of the clarifiers that are just at the bottom of this photo will also be removed and enable enough space for the bioreactors and the membranes to be installed. I do need to report right now the budget on the wastewater treatment plant is a little bit over right now. We had committed to a $100 million project. Right now, the construction on the project is at $100 million. We do have some design costs and costs for some of our project management team that's pushing that into the $110, $115 million range. We'll continue to work with those staff members to try to make cuts in the project scope and other things to bring that within budget, but it may require some adjustments in some of our funding mechanisms on this project, but we'll continue to keep the council up to date on what's happening. But we have issued a small, what we call package 1A to the contractor to begin demolition. It's using only city funds. You may recall in the fiscal year that was just approved as of July 1st, it included about $2.5 million of just city funds. So we've authorized the contractor to begin demolition using those funds. But the actual construction and replacement of the treatment plant will utilize the state loan. And so this is, from a timing standpoint, this is critical that we move forward on the state loan. Also, the council should be aware that we will be mailing out a notice this week to all the residents within Provo City This is a copy of the notice that the residents will receive. I'm not sure if this was included in your packet or not. We sent this to the council staff, and I'm hoping that you received a copy of this notice. But each resident will receive this notice this week, informing them of the public hearing on October 6th. And I also wanted to let you know a little bit about the nature of the bond. We can go back, Jimmy, to the slide presentation, and just a reminder to the council. If we go to the last slide. Oh, sorry. Here we go. So this is a little bit of financial information for the council on the nature of the state loan. And just a reminder, the interest rate on the state loan is 0.5%. It's a very low interest rate. There's also some other favorable items that require no principal payments until the project's done. You can see we're planning in 2024 through 2026, very small principal payments, and the principal and the interest begin to kick in from that point. And you can see overall at the bottom column, second column to the right, the overall interest on this loan is about $4.6 million, and again represented in a very low interest rate that's been offered from the state. At this point, unless there's any specific questions, I'm going to turn the time over to Dan Follett from our finance department. And he has a couple of consultants that will probably help him to explain the documents that you will see in your packet next council meeting on October 6th that we'll be asking for approval. So Dan, you can go ahead.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me okay. I've been struggling with technology a little bit in this meeting for some reason, but yeah, Eric Hunter will be joining the call too. He had a meeting that was ending kind of right up against this one. And then Brian Baker from Science Bank would also join. Eric Hunter's with Chapman Cutler, so he's the bond counsel on this. I think Dave did an excellent job already covering kind of the details of it. The parameters of this loan are that the principal amount is $75.8 million. That does not include $2 million worth of principal forgiveness. That's the portion that the city will ultimately need to pay back over time. And as Dave mentioned, it's at 0.5% interest rate. There is a default rate of 18%. We don't anticipate that we would ever go into that amount. I would also mention that this is not a general obligation bond, rather it's a revenue type bond that will be repaid through revenues collected in the wastewater treatment facility. The repayment period is a 20-year amortization. That begins after essentially a 4-year construction drawdown period that takes place initially before the 20-year amortization. The drawdowns will be done incrementally, meaning that as the money is spent in the construction process, we will submit a draw to the state and they will provide us the funding for that portion of the project. Again, the amortization schedule, the final payment will occur in 2043. As Dave mentioned, there's a publication notice of the bonds. That started a 30-day contest period where anyone that has any questions or concerns may raise those issues and bring them forward to the city and to the council. And then there's a notice of public hearing that is being mailed to all ratepayers, making them aware of the public hearing that will take place, I believe, on October 6th, Tuesday, October 6th. And that's basically what's in the notice of public hearing. It also notes what the 2019 rates are per 1,000 gallons, $3.76, and it will increase by $2.02 per 1,000 gallons in conjunction with the repayment of this loan. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Follett and Mr. Decker. Any questions? I just quickly note, Mr. Decker, I don't know, I was just scanning through the packet. I didn't see in our packet the thing that you showed that was going to be sent.
In the packet, or we received that document this morning, and the packet was published on Thursday.
Okay.
So when we republish with the new meeting materials, it will be there.
Okay, so we'll be able to look at that. I wanted to take a closer look at that, but
yes, it will just be on the agenda's website.
okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Decker or Mr. Follett, Mr. Harding?
Thank you. I think the state is being very generous with us. This is going to be painful for all ratepayers, but I mean, not only is it that 0.5%, which is obviously a great interest rate, but we have the delayed payments, we have the interest only for the additional 3 years, and then with the principal forgiveness, I mean, the effective interest rate is much less than even 0.5% taken as a whole. I'm not financially savvy enough to calculate what that is, but I mean, it is a very low effective interest rate, and so not a pleasant thing to deal with, but really we are really being helped out by the state on this. So I appreciate that and appreciate the team that has put this together.
I concur. I do hope it was one of the reasons I want to look at what's being communicated to the public. I know that we're all aware of how easily this could get misunderstood in the public about what's actually happening and why it's happening. And even though it does represent an impact on everybody's pocketbook, knowing the context that I've been a part of in my 2.5 years on the council, I'm really appreciative of how hard Mr. Decker and others have worked to make it as affordable as possible for the city, knowing that some of the options we were looking at would have been far, far worse than what we are doing now, and that this is something that we have to do to respond to these regulations, and this is the most responsible way to do it, and I'm really appreciative of that. I hope that our citizens will appreciate that as well. So thank you.
Chair, if I could make one point, it certainly is, we did a lot of analysis that looked at what a market deal would look like, and it was far more expensive on a number of levels, but one benefit that we haven't brought up here today to the state deal is the fact that once you close a market loan, so for instance, if you were borrowing $75–80 million, you would start accruing interest and start making payments on that entire amount of the loan, regardless of when you spent it. The fact that the state allows you to draw the money down over the 3-year period where it's needed legitimately saves you another couple $1 million in interest that on a market deal you would have had to pay over those first couple of years on the entire loan. As soon as it was closed, you'd start accruing that interest expense. But so this saves, I would think $2 to $3 million in that regard, where you don't have to pay interest on anything until you've actually drawn it down and spent it.
Wonderful. Thank you for that reminder. Appreciate it.
Mr. Handley, if I can add one other thing that may come up once the mailer goes out, residents may be asking about the fact that oftentimes when bonds come up, there is an actual vote on it. And one of the questions that we've received and you're likely to receive as a council is, why doesn't the general public get to vote on this? Because and the answer is, it's a revenue bond. It's taken against, the bond is taken against the wastewater rates that are paid. And so it's not a general obligation bond, it's a revenue bond. And so the council authorizes revenue bonds. It's not voted on by the general public. And so that's one of the questions that you're likely to receive from residents. And I don't know if Wayne or others, Brian or other may be able to add a little bit more to that.
Thank you, Ms. Ellsworth.
Yeah, I agree with the previous comments that this is a great deal, and I'm really grateful to the state and to our staff and employees who have worked to create this solution. I think it will be important to shape a conversation around this for the public and to educate them as best as possible in probably multiple channels, because there's already some struggles with regular bonds, with school bonds, with the new billing system. So I think citizens will be very sensitive to these kinds of rate changes, and the more education and prevention we can do to help them understand what we're trying to accomplish, the better.
And we recognize that there is a website that is referenced on that mailer that will have some information, and you're welcome to visit the website. It will be up this week and ready for review. And again, we're happy to have any comments or recommendations from the council or the administration on changing information that's needed on that website.
Thank you. I do want to acknowledge Mayor Kafusi has joined us, as well as Mr. Fillmore, who joined in the last little bit. We're glad to have you with us. There's no further discussion on this item. Then we will, let's see. Need to make sure I know the protocol here. A closed session has been requested. And so I will look for, sorry, I guess this is presented by Mr. Jones. So go ahead, Mr. Jones.
All right, I'm trying to get everything turned back on. A closed session has been requested. It's with regard to a strategy session regarding real property, which is a permitted reason under the statute. So it would be appropriate for a motion to close the meeting at this time.
All right, do I have a motion? Mr. Sewell?
I move to close the meeting.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Harding, any discussion? If not, I will call for a vote. I will vote yes. Mr. Harding?
Yes.
Mr. Hoban?
Yes.
Ms. Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mr. Shipley?
Yes.
Mr. Sewell?
Yes.
And Mr. Fillmore?
Yes.
All right, so we will move then into our closed meeting, and let's see, it's 3:18, 3:19. Let's say we'll meet at 3:25 on Teams. Okay, give us 6 minutes to transition here. Okay, thank you.